afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm Sue Whitworth. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Elmhurst. Appreciate your time coming out this afternoon. We are here 85 years in Elmhurst, bringing democracy to town, bringing candidate forums like this, registering voters. And if you believe in democracy, you should be a member of the League of Women Voters. Anyone over the age of 16 is welcome to join. So today we're bringing only opposed candidates in front of you for the forum. We're starting out today with the 5th Congressional District, and Barb Young from our LaGrange Area League will be our moderator. We have student helpers around the room that are collecting your questions. And if you have a question for the candidate, we ask that you write it down in an index card and hand it to one of our pages. We will then sort them by topic, and we will bring them to the moderator at the end. In your programs, we have prepared statements. We have prepared questions that we've put together. The candidates have all received them ahead of time and prepared for these questions. And then your follow-up will be after that. So we ask you to silence any cell phones you might have and have quiet in the auditorium. We are taping this, and it will appear next month on Channel 6. We don't have an exact time yet, but watch programming for times. We will also have a link on our website, www.lwvelmhurst.org, so you can always find a link to the video there. One note today for the 5th Congressional District candidates, we have the Democratic candidates here today, and with one exception, Mike Quigley could not be here today. He had intended on coming, but because of the budget impasse, he had to stay in DC. So we'll get started today with the 5th Congressional District, and I'll turn it over to Barb Young.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to moderate again this year. I want to give one little plug. I'm the organizer of the Equal Pay Day Rally in the Daly Center Plaza, and this year's rally will be April 10th from noon to 1. So if you can come or encourage other people to come, we'd love to see you. We're going to begin with opening statements, and each of the candidates has 2 minutes, and we're going to start with Stephen Schwartzberg.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this. My name is Steve Schwartzberg. I'm running for Congress in the 5th Congressional District as a Bernie Sanders supporter. I'm a lifelong social democrat who believes it's time for a moral as well as a political revolution in this country. My training is as a historian, Yale PhD 1996, fancy academic credential, historian, a scholar of the history of American foreign relations who believes we can draw from our common past to build a shared future. My favorite revolutionary among the founders of our country and the framers of our Constitution is the Pennsylvania lawyer James Wilson. Years before Thomas Jefferson, Wilson had written that all men are by nature equal and free. We, the American people, according to Wilson, are sovereigns without subjects. I think that's a succinct way of stating the most basic ideal of the American Revolution. It took the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement to even begin to make this true for African Americans. It took the suffragists and the women's rights movement to even begin to make this true for women. It took the organization of trade unions and the labor movement to even begin to keep this true for working people, to prevent the power of the state from being used on behalf of corporations and making subjects of workers. And in our own day, it will take a moral and political revolution to keep the power of the 1% from making subjects of the rest of us and destroying the promise of the American Revolution. I think we have to begin with a vision of what kind of society we want to be. I believe we want to be a social democratic society, just, prosperous, ecologically sound, and self-governed by we the people. It is in order to help advance and to help build that society that I'm running for office. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll hear from our second candidate, again with a 2-minute opening statement, Benjamin Wolf.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting. As a new candidate, sometimes it's challenging for us to find an audience, especially when we're going up against an incumbent Democrat. So this means a great deal to us. So again, thank you. Again, my name is Benjamin Thomas Wolf. I was born and raised in a small town in Ohio to public school teacher parents who at a very young age instilled the ideas of education and hard work to me and my siblings. Most of my childhood, I remember sitting around the dinner table, after dinner, in fact, doing homework and watching my parents grade papers, and again, them explaining the ideals and importance of education and working hard to achieve the things that you want. I was fortunate that I was recruited by the Federal Bureau of Investigation out of Kent State University. After my training at Quantico, Virginia, I was placed on a counter-espionage and counterterrorism squad. I worked for 5 years protecting and defending Americans domestically and abroad. I was part of the anthrax investigation and one of the first responders to the Pentagon on September 11th. After my time at the FBI, I went to the State Department as a United States diplomat, working overseas, mostly in Africa, where I raised my twin boys. I served in Iraq multiple times, and now I'm a teacher here in Chicago. I teach human rights and government. I'm running on a very progressive platform as well. You'll hear me today talk about things like universal health care, legalized cannabis, and free education. I'm running for Congress because I have great concern about the direction in which our city and country are moving, and feel that right now we need strong Democratic leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our third candidate giving her opening statement will be Samina Mustafa.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here with the League of Women Voters. As a League member in Chicago, I feel especially honored to be partnering with you on this important discussion. As she said, my name is Samina Mustafa. I'm running as a progressive Democrat for the U.S. House of Representatives. I would like to tell you a little bit about my background, why I'm running, and I look forward to answering your questions. My Indian Muslim immigrant parents came here in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. They came here to study and decided to stay to pursue the American dream. My parents have lived in the district for over 40 years. I've lived in the district for over 30 years. As a Northwestern graduate, I've been a leader in business, nonprofits, and the arts community, and ran a Planned Parenthood on the West Side. I've spoken to people from all backgrounds, and I've heard it directly from voters across the district, including in Elmhurst, that you want bold, progressive, and inclusive leadership, and you don't feel like you're getting it. I don't think I have to tell anyone in this room how you felt on November 8th, 2016, when you saw the screen go from blue to red. We all agree that it's an opportunity, a critical time in our history for new leadership, for bold, progressive leadership to support things like Medicare for all, a living wage, and progressive taxation, and I would be honored to be your representative. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll begin with the questions that were written by League members, and we're going to start with Mr. Wolf. And the first question is this: what can be done to help improve civic discourse and reduce the level of rancor and partisan bickering in national politics? Mr. Wolf?
I think that's a perfect question for today. I hear there's a government shutdown in Washington, D.C. right now. It is disturbing, to say the least, that we have a Republican president, a Republican Congress, and a Republican Senate that are crippling the United States government and the economy and people, their jobs, communities, and organizations. I work for 2 FBI directors, 3 presidents, and 4 secretaries of state. I have worked for Republicans and Democrats. I traveled with Condoleezza Rice for 2 years as personal staff. I also worked under the Obama administration in the intelligence community. With that said, I can tell you one thing for certain about the Republican administration. They will not compromise. They are expert negotiators. They will push things as far to the right as possible. Right now, we are living under the Tea Party. It's a real issue for a lot of people right now. The only way to negotiate with them is to pull them further to the left. These centrists in Congress right now are simply not working. The incumbent congressman, who is not present today, it must be noted he's not present. He is trying to negotiate in a way that will not matter. It will not work. What we need is to push things like, again, universal health care, legalizing cannabis, free education. We need to be as progressive and liberal as possible to try to pull them back to the center in a way that we can finally get the things that we need.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Mustafa, the same question. What can be done to help improve civic discourse and reduce the level of rancor and partisan bickering in national politics?
You can call me Samina, by the way.
Got it.
That's easier.
Thank you.
So I would agree with what Benjamin stated. I would go further. I would say I've spent years working on building coalitions and creating meaningful change in my community. It's very important to be respectful. But bipartisanship in and of itself is not an end that we should be always aiming for. Bipartisan coalitions have stopped Medicare for all, which would give health care access to all Americans regardless of income. Bipartisan coalitions authorized defense spending through the National Defense Authorization Act that gave billions more to Donald Trump than he asked for. and a bipartisan coalition reauthorized FISA 702, a bill that the ACLU has been fighting because it gives unlimited spying ability to the Trump administration. I want to point out that progressive Democrats were on the opposite side of these issues, and as your representative, I would stand with them. The incumbent, Mike Quigley, who has been pointed out is not here, stood with the Republicans. It is important to have a progressive representative who understands not only the values of this district, but the values that we uphold as Americans. Thank you.
Okay, same question, Stephen?
So I think we have to begin with a question of where this partisan rancor and intense partisanship comes from. And I think it comes from the fact that we, the American people, are divided in our outlook, divided largely between Republicans and Democrats. In order to overcome it, we're going to have to build a new consensus in the country. It took a long time to build the consensus of the New Deal in the 1930s and 1940s. It took a long time to build the Reaganite consensus that we're now fighting against, beginning in Reagan's election in 1980. We have to return to a situation in which we seek to speak to and with each other and not merely at each other, not merely trying to mobilize our constituencies for battle, but on behalf of a common understanding of the common good of the country. In the Middle Ages, in the University of Paris, you had to state your opponent's position in debate to their satisfaction before you could begin to present your own position. I'm not suggesting we return to that, but the spirit of that is a spirit we should embrace in our nation's debates. To advance the country's interests, we need to have a strong progressive left position, as my opponents have been articulating. But beyond that, we need to be talking to and with each other and not merely at each other. Thank you.
Okay. Here's the second question, and I'll begin with Samina. Where do you stand on gun control legislation?
Thank you. So on this point, I believe Mike Quigley has shown leadership, and we are in agreement on many points. On things that have broad bipartisan support, like background checks, and banning assault weapons, and limiting sales to the mentally ill and those who have been convicted of domestic violence. We're in agreement. There are additional points, though, that I would want to push. There was a 2005 law that limits the liability of gun manufacturers from being sued when their products are being used in the execution of crimes. We need to repeal that law, and I would pass legislation that would actually create a fund to compensate police and healthcare costs related with gun violence. It's over $200 billion that we spend on the victims of gun violence and protecting our cities, and the gun manufacturers should be liable for that. Furthermore, I think any conversation where we're talking about gun control, we need to address criminal justice. And as your representative, I would fight for both. I think it's incredibly important. There's two pieces of legislation that I would address your attention to. The Justice is Not for Sale Act, which addresses the issue of private prisons. That's something that the incumbent Mike Quigley hesitated to sponsor in 2015, and when it came up in 2017, he waited months to support it. Furthermore, there's another bill, the Thin Blue Line Act, which imposes harsher penalties on those who have been convicted of killing police officers. That was a bill that the NAACP and ACLU were fighting, and that is a bill that Mike Quigley voted for. I would stand against it because we need to protect all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question for Mr. Wolf. Where do you stand on gun control legislation?
Thank you. My parents grew up in rural Ohio, and my father's family grew up extremely poor, to the point where he was actually hunting for their food. There was woods across the street from their little trailer, and they would hunt for their food. So to hear people talk about banning rifles for hunting, I think, is unnecessary. Shotguns, the same. And if people want to have a small handgun in their house to protect their family and their property, I have no issues with that. What I do have a problem with is when people have the ability to purchase machine guns, whether it be automatic or semi-automatic. There is no reason whatsoever, ever, for people to have access to weapons like that. I was a federal agent. I carried a gun for 2 decades, everywhere, overseas, domestically. I was trained, I was responsible. There is no place in American society for semi-automatic weapons or machine guns, period. And I disagree with what Ms. Mustafa said. Mike Quigley has not done enough. Lawmakers make the laws. He has not been able to properly fight against the NRA. He has not been able to properly create and draft new laws to establish an anti-gun position. These corporations and these interest groups are not only hurting, they are killing Americans. We have to take much more aggressive stances. We need new Democratic leadership that, again, have a policy to forcefully and strictly fight all gun legislation that is currently on the table. We need to change the laws and make them so that children and citizens and the public is no longer being harmed.
Thank you. Now, Stephen Schwartzberg, where do you stand on gun control legislation?
I believe that guns should be regulated at least as strictly as automobiles, which means we should have tests for people who want to own a gun. They should have to purchase insurance for their gun. There should be civil penalties established in law anytime a gun is used either by the owner or by somebody else in the commission of a crime. This is in some ways similar to what Samina is talking about in terms of liability issues, but it can be set up in the law so that any time a gun is used, if a gun is lost or stolen through carelessness on the part of the owner, there should be a penalty. And as a result of that, we would impress upon all gun owners in the country the seriousness of maintaining their own control of their own guns and keeping them and using them in the ways in which they should be used and not other ways. We would reduce gun violence in the society as a result.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to begin again with Benjamin Wolf, and here's the third question. Immigration detention centers have a reputation for insensitive and inhumane treatment of those being detained, such as keeping families separated for an extended period of time. How could you or would you seek to improve these conditions at detention centers?
It's a perfect question, thank you. I worked in the immigration system for 2 decades as a federal agent, as a diplomat, and as an investigator. I used to issue visas overseas. I have worked smuggling investigations, criminal investigations regarding passport and visa fraud. I have personally arrested people that were trafficking children into this country. The detention centers, we have to remember, are prisons. They are not refugee camps, they are not welcome centers. People are being detained and arrested, and you simply cannot have men and women together. You simply cannot have adults and children together. The important thing to remember here is that the problem, again, is the law. Immigration law is incredibly complex. After having worked in this system for 20 years, I am still a novice at this. It is created by lawmakers, which means that they are creating laws that are, again, too complex for us to understand. The immigration system needs to be completely rehauled to where it is realistic, reasonable, and simpler. We are allowing amnesty, then we're taking it away. We're allowing visas, then we're pulling them back. We're allowing DACA recipients to come in and then asking them to leave. The immigration system has to be simple, realistic, and as a congressperson, as a congressman and a congressperson, I will make it much easier for people to understand. I have worked in this system. Again, the United States Congress has been failing all of us over and over. And one of the things I want you to take away today is that new candidates must have a voice as we do here today. You should be looking for the next generation of American leadership, not relying on what has been happening. The status quo is simply not working. Thank you.
Mr. Schwartzberg, where do you stand on immigration detention?
We have to ask ourselves what kind of a country we want to be, whether we want to be a nation of immigrants again, or whether we want to be a country that maintains an inhuman detention and deportation system. That's the choice before the American people. Fundamentally, given that choice, I favor returning to the policies of the country during the first century of its existence, when anyone could come into the country and become a citizen, rather than what we live with now, which is, as I say, inhuman to the people who are caught up in this system. One can try and humanize that system by, say, abolishing solitary confinement for prisoners. One can try and humanize that system by abolishing private prisons. One can try and humanize that system by allowing people to meet with their families more frequently, or one can abolish that system entirely, and I favor the abolition of that system. I believe that we should have support for English language requirements for people who want citizenship. We should have strong civics education for people who want citizenship. But fundamentally, I believe we should embrace our identity as a hospitable people who wants to welcome individuals from every country on earth to become part of this great nation and its great future. Thank you.
Okay, Samina?
Yes. Like my opponents, I believe that we have to reform our immigration system. It's currently insensitive and inhumane. We need a Clean Dream Act. We need to provide a path to citizenship, not only for DACA recipients, but for the 11 million undocumented that are, they want to be here. They're part of this country. We should welcome them here and give them a path to citizenship. We also need to address the issue of detention centers. These are primarily run by for-profit entities and are violating the human rights of detainees. That is completely unjust. As your representative, I would fight for their rights and make sure to dismantle that system. There's two laws that I want to point your attention to. There's HR 1608 that specifically would increase accountability for Border Patrol, would require them to wear body cameras, so we would be able to understand what violations have taken place. Secondly, there's another protection, HR 15, which would protect sensitive locations so that the undocumented would not be picked up from places like schools and churches. It's unfortunate, but Mike Quigley has generally been good on immigration, but he has not lent his support to these bills. It is important to have a representative who is fighting for the most vulnerable in our society, and I would do that as your representative. Last but not least, I want to also bring up the people who have given service to our country, veterans who have been deported. We need to bring them back. They gave everything to this country. We should honor them with a return to this country and a path to citizenship. That's HR 1405. Mike Quigley has not supported that, and I believe that is an important, as an advocate in your representative of Congress, it would be critical to show that service to this country should be rewarded with citizenship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And for all the candidates, this is the fourth question from the League. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative was launched in 2010 to accelerate efforts to protect and restore the largest system of fresh surface water in the world, the Great Lakes. How would you work to help protect this initiative? And we'll start with Mr. Wolf.
I hope that I don't have to explain the importance of clean water to people in this room. Clearly, we are made of water. We come from water. It is the most critical element for human survival. I grew up on Lake Erie. In a small town, we spent every weekend on the lake. My dad, again, a public teacher, bought a little crummy boat, and we spent our weekends fishing and swimming and boating and bathing in this water. So most of my childhood is of being in the Great Lakes. The only way to ensure that the Great Lakes are not polluted and not filled with oil and toxins and chemicals is to not take money from corporations. My opponent, the incumbent congressman, who again is not present here today, takes tens of thousands of dollars from large companies, petroleum companies, large industries. So when he creates legislation, he is then beholden to them. I am not taking any money from corporations or special interest groups. We need to create a moratorium on dumping, clean water acts. We should have no toxins dumped into our drinking water. It seems fairly obvious to me and probably many of you, but the current Congress and the current congressmen and the current Senate continue to pass legislation that allow this to happen. We as citizens have to stand up, elect people that are not taking corporate donations, that are protecting the environment as intensely as possible, and again, finding a new generation of Democratic leadership to lead our country into the future.
Okay, same question, Samina?
Yes. So the GLRI is incredibly important. I grew up alongside Lake Michigan and have enjoyed it as a child as well. What I would say is the GLRI budget, the $300 million, has been protected. And I know that the League was a big proponent of the Clean Water Act and fought for the passage of that. What is at risk now with the government shutdown is that the GLRI relies on other departments within the EPA to execute its mission. With the shutdown, that's at risk. So what I would point out is that we have a Republican Congress. We have Paul Ryan and the Freedom Caucus that is putting the Great Lakes, as well as children and the undocumented, at risk because they cannot honor their agreements. The Great Lakes is incredibly important. As your representative, I continue to protect that funding and be a strong advocate for the environment. Generally, Mike Quigley has been good on the environment, but there's one bill he has not supported, which I think is part of the future of how we protect our planet. It's the Off Fossil Fuels Act, HR 3671, that is the most ambitious piece of environmental legislation to ever be introduced. I would fight for that and vote for that as your representative. Mike Quigley has not supported that, and I think we need forward-thinking leadership on the environment in Congress. Thank you.
Mr. Schwartzberg, same question.
Thank you. Yes, I believe here again we are in a battle for the soul of the country, and the issue turns on the question of environmental justice. Most people in the country support programs to respect and protect the Great Lakes, like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. In addition, most people in the country are concerned with global warming, but there is a faction within the country that is in vociferous denial about global warming and that has based its position on hatred for environmentalism, and unfortunately that faction includes the President of the United States, which is why the assault on the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative took place, not because of its virtues, which are many, but because it was seen as part of an environmental justice position in the country. In order to defend it, we must begin by defending the principle of good stewardship, the virtues of good stewardship, but then in addition talk about the advantages to the country's future and to its economy of such good stewardship. In California, for example, as a result of the Californian commitment to renewable energies, 8 times as many jobs are in renewables at this point as are in fossil fuels. The state of California will have I almost said the country of California. The state of California will have half of its in energy supplied by renewables by the year 2020, 10 years ahead of schedule. We need to make such a commitment nationwide for our own energy future, and we need to phase out fossil fuels by reducing, first of all, our subsidies of the fossil fuel industry and then imposing taxes on it to discourage its existence. Fundamentally, we will defend the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative by persuading the solid majority of people in this country who already agree with it that it's not only good and virtuous citizenship to be concerned with the environment and with environmental justice, but it is in our economic interest. For every dollar that's invested in the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, $2 are brought about in terms of return from fishing, housing values along the lakeshore improvements. In the Lake Muskegon restoration effort, the return on investment is 6 to 1. This is a sensible investment that our country should be making in its future, as well as good stewardship.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to turn to questions from the audience, and I do appreciate your turning in your questions. And here's the first one, and I'll begin with Samina. Excuse me. What can be done to keep big money from buying our politicians at all levels of government?
Great question, and that's why I'm refusing corporate PAC and special interest donations. It is incredibly important to preserve the integrity of our democracy. You know, we've had attacks on our elections, but I think what's been a longer and more corrosive impact has been the impact of big money in politics. Unfortunately, we currently have a representative who's taken actually millions of dollars from corporate PACs and special interests. Mike Quigley has taken money from defense contractors, big banks, and companies that are not concerned about the values of our democracy. They're concerned about their special interests. And so it is imperative that we have uncompromised leaders in Congress, and that is what I will be in Congress.
Thank you. And just to remind the candidates in the audience, the answers to these questions will be 1 minute. Okay, Mr. Schwartzberg, what do you think can be done to keep big money from buying our politicians?
So I think the essential thing that we need to do is to overturn Citizens United, which can easily either be done by constitutional amendment or by persuading the Supreme Court that its view of corruption was mistaken. In order to persuade the Supreme Court that its view of corruption was mistaken, we have to understand the nature of big money's corruption of our politics. And the quick story that I'll tell about that has to do with 1998 and the decision that Citibank made to merge with Travelers Insurance in spite of the fact that the law on the books, the Glass-Steagall Act, prevented such mergers. At the time, the head of the Travelers Insurance head, Sandy Weil, said that this would not be a problem, this law on the books, because of the conversations they'd had with the Fed and the Treasury. The head of the Treasury at that point was Robert Rubin. He lobbied the Congress to gut Glass-Steagall, which it did by a bipartisan vote of 343 to 86. The day after it voted, he resigned from the Treasury. 3 months later, he was hired by Citigroup for a salary of $15 million a year without operating responsibility. We as a society need to understand that this is the kind of thing that's going on, and we need to put a stop to it.
Okay. Same question, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you. I think the real question here is, what type of leaders do we want at the helm of the American government? Do we want people that are accepting money from corporations? Or do we want people that are beholden to voters? Anytime a politician accepts money, they're beholden to that person or entity. The incumbent, again, takes tens of thousands of dollars from large corporations. That is the problem in America today. We should be looking for, and you, when you go vote, you should be looking for the next generation of leaders that are beholden to the voters and the citizens only. It is the only way to get away from pollution and all of the other problems we see in America today. You should be looking for people that are public servants, Like myself, I've been in public service my entire career. I have never been motivated by money. It has been nothing but sacrifice and service. And I hope that when you go vote, you'll remember that.
Okay, here's the second question. Even with the Equal Pay Act of 1963, the gender pay gap is still very present in our society. What steps would you take to draw more attention to this issue and eventually close the gap? Mr. Schwartzberg?
So I think we have to realize that the structural inequalities that women face in terms of the economy are deeply rooted in the nature of women's work in the world, which includes the rearing of children to some extent, as well as sharing that work with their husbands. And that work is uncompensated in our current Social Security system. As a result of that, women at the end of their lives receive less money and support from the government, and that should be addressed by compensation practices. We should remove the cap on Social Security taxable income at $127,200 and use some of that money to expand Social Security, and with that expansion, particularly seek to address the wage gap between men and women in the society.
Thank you. Samina, what would you do to close the wage gap?
Yes. So thank you. I am in agreement with what Steve said on the Social Security issue. I think we need to raise the cap. Mike Quigley has not supported that, specifically the provision that would raise the limits for lifetime low-wage earners, which uniquely hurts older women. The other thing that's incredibly important is to raise the federal minimum wage. We have to raise, we've had a fight for 15 for so long that it's actually probably more like $19 that we need to raise it to. It's incredibly important that we address the fact that a lot of jobs are held by women that are low-wage jobs, and so we need to have an equitable and fair wage. So that would be my mission as your representative, and we currently have a representative who only now has signed on to H.R. 15 when it has little chance to pass. Organizations like the SEIU have been pushing him to support it. The local here has asked for his support, and he's only now supporting it when there's very little chance to pass. So we need advocates in Congress who understand that this affects not just women, but all people, and that we need to fight for economic justice as well.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you. I think the real question here comes down to equality in our society. And I think we hit on one of the main topics, and it comes down to the federal minimum wage. We talk about this a lot as quote-unquote progressives and how we treat people in everyday society. I own a small business. I own a restaurant in Chicago. And one of the things we try to do is not only give everyone health care, but pay them a top wage, at least $15 an hour. People say that $15 an hour is reasonable. I think it actually should be higher than that. At $15 an hour, you are still not breaking even with rent, car payment, education, and food. And God forbid you have a child or two. It's time for us as a society to determine how we want people to live. Do we want them to be healthy and happy? If so, we need to give them at least $15 an hour. We need to give them universal health care and free education. That in itself closes the wage gap and allows everyone to have equal treatment under law.
Thank you. Now, I understand this is a question near and dear to the residents of Elmhurst, and it is this. O'Hare Airport is a huge economic generator for our area, but increased traffic also negatively impacts communities with noise, air pollution, and quality of life. Would you support sharing air traffic with regional airports to alleviate the negative impacts on our communities? And I'll begin with Mr. Wolf.
Perfect question. I stood on someone's front porch yesterday and talked at length about this. We sat long enough on her front porch that we saw 15 planes fly directly over her house. There have been some massive changes at O'Hare Airport. They are looking at closing some of the diagonal runways, which then causes planes to take 3 straight runways, which run them right over the city, as well as right over this small town. One of the things that they've asked for is a tax abatement for people that have homes. It is destroying their property value, destroying it. We hope, and I would like to see the federal government give all residents on their flight paths a massive tax credit to help regain the property value in their homes. The other things I'd like to see, one of the other things I'd like to see is a study, a long-term study by the National Institute of Health that can evaluate properly, scientifically and medically, any possible medical injuries, or problems that arise from being in a flight path.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartzberg?
Yes, one of the things I've championed is a Marshall Plan for the United States with investment in our nation's roads, our bridges, our airports and airways, our railways, our electrical grid, our water systems. Fundamentally, the country needs to do what it did during the New Deal, which is to make a major commitment of its GNP to infrastructure investment and to cease engaging in deferred maintenance. We spend about 0.6% of our GDP at present, as against 3% during the New Deal years or even 2% during the Carter years. Part of this investment should be in improving our nation's infrastructure with regard to airports and trying to facilitate the coordination of air traffic so that this problem is less pronounced. It can't be avoided entirely, but as candidate Wolf was saying a minute ago, part of the reason why things have gotten worse is there's been a deterioration in the physical infrastructure at O'Hare that needs to be addressed by nationwide investment.
Okay, Samina?
Yes, my father worked at the Department of Aviation. He was at O'Hare for 20 years, so the noise is not his fault. But I do want to say that we need an advocate who would be willing to stand up to the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, and the Department of Aviation. There's a coalition of groups that respond specifically to residents' concerns, and I would be willing to call out Rahm and have more accountability from the city of Chicago as it relates to how the operation of O'Hare affects residents throughout the region. I think it's incredibly important to have someone who's also not conflicted. Currently, we have a representative, Mike Quigley, who takes money from airline PACs, and he is incented to support whatever will advocate for what will be profitable for the airlines. So we need an advocate for residents and people in the region to improve O'Hare and to work with the FAA on how to make a better driver for our entire economy. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question. What role should the federal government have in stemming the current opioid crisis in the United States? What would you support? Samina?
So I believe this is actually a public health crisis. And that's why I will advocate for and put my name on H.R. 676, Medicare for All, which will give health care, including substance abuse, help to all Americans. It's incredibly imperative that we address this issue. The other thing I want to say about the opioid crisis is that unlike the crack epidemic of the 80s, the opioid epidemic, the crack epidemic was very much racialized. We should be treating both as public health crises and also deal with the fact that we have devastated communities of color in terms of drug treatment. And again, Medicare for All would address this in a very dramatic fashion. Thank you.
Mr. Wolf?
One of the priorities of my campaign has been universal health care. I have worked in dozens of countries overseas, both in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and I have noticed that the healthiest and happiest societies all have universal health care. Universal health care allows everyone to have equal treatment, again, under law. It allows us to have preventive maintenance, not just emergency room visits over and over. The opioid crisis is an issue not just because we don't have universal health care, but also because we haven't legalized cannabis yet. A lot of pain medications lead to these drug addictions. Cannabis and marijuana can allow people to take a different substance that helps alleviate pain, anxiety, and other problems. The money from cannabis legalization will go strictly to education and rehab centers. We are losing billions of dollars a year by not having legalized cannabis in the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartzberg?
Yes, I agree with both of my competitors on this, both as far as national health care insurance is concerned and as far as treating the opioid epidemic as a public health crisis, and of recognizing that we should not be engaged in the kinds of hostile and discriminatory actions that we took in the crack epidemic or have taken with regard to pot for more than a generation in the so-called war on drugs. It is time to bring the war on drugs to an end, and to legalize marijuana and to work to help people who are dealing with addiction issues as a public health crisis and a public health issue and not as a criminal issue.
Thank you. Next question. As a freshman congressperson, how would you create change in a system that is simultaneously trying to change you? I begin with Mr. Schwartzberg.
So I'm running for office on the basis of Bernie's program and platform, the Our Revolution program and platform, which I encourage people to look at my webpage and check out. Fundamentally, I believe this program should be advocated by every progressive in the country, whether they're in office or running for office, and we should be hammering on these issues again and again and again in a way to persuade the American people of the virtue of a program of social democratic reform for the country. So I stand for Medicare for all. I stand for massive infrastructure investment, a Marshall Plan for the United States. I stand for a freedom budget to begin to abolish poverty by investing in health care, in housing, in job creation, in job training. I believe that if we can pursue these sets of programs and policies nationwide, we can transform this country from one that serves the interests of the 1% to one that serves the common good. And my commitment to you as a congressman will be to stand for those issues in Congress as well as standing for them in candidacy for Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf?
This is one of the questions most candidates running for office are asked quite routinely. How do we know you won't change once you're in office? Because everyone seems to. My response has always been, you should look at the person holistically. You should look at who they were before they went into office. Were they motivated by money? Were they taking corporate donations? Were they volunteers? Were they in public service? Were they teachers? What was their background? My background has been public service, teaching, volunteerism. I was one of the first diplomats to volunteer to go to Iraq. I took my kids voluntarily to Africa because I wanted them and myself to experience a different type of life. It changes everyone profoundly. I will not change. We're not taking money from corporations. We're talking to voters, individuals, and families. Again, the important thing is to look at who they were before they went into office, and chances are they will be that exact same person.
Amina?
Yes, thank you. Like my opponents, I agree that it is incredibly important to have uncompromised representation. I have refused corporate PAC donations, but I also have spent the last 25 years advocating for women, girls, and marginalized groups. I volunteered at a domestic violence shelter. I have taught English as a second language. My entire life and career has been about protecting those who need the most protection, the most vulnerable, and that is something I'm committed to, and I will remain committed to that as your representative and will not change.
Thank you. Okay, for each of the candidates, how do you plan on using your past to improve the lives of voters in the 5th and beyond? Mr. Schwartzberg?
How do I plan on using my past?
Your past experience,
My past
education.
So when my first book was reviewed in Foreign Affairs in 2005, they described me as a passionate pro-labor social democrat. That's who I am. You can see it in my writings, my published work for 30 years. I care about the people of this country. I care about the people of the world. I wrote a paper at one point, a published article on American planning for the occupation of Japan. Probably the single greatest good that the United States has done for another country has been our support for the post-war land reform in Japan. As a result of that proposal, 5 million Japanese small farmers received land of their own. Instead of seeking revenge on a people who had attacked us, we sought to make allies of that people as against the militarists who had betrayed them, as well as the people of the United States. My commitment is to work for the common good. I work for that common good globally, I work for that common good locally, I work for that common good nationally if given the chance, and that is what I'm asking you to give me that opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Samina?
Yes, thank you. I have founded and led organizations. I've hired and fired people. I've been a leader in my community. I have been the only person running in this race who has experience in a federally funded healthcare setting. I think it's critically important to have people who understand how policy and funding affect real people. I've gone to Capitol Hill to advocate for legislation. More important than the experience, though, I have the values that are critical, are vital to advocate for the legislation that is aligned with the values of this district. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Wolf?
The important thing to remember here is that your interests are my interests. I live here in Chicago. I live in these communities. I work in these communities. I have served these communities. My children go to school in these communities. I'm a homeowner. I'm a small business owner. We go door to door as a campaign not to talk at you, but to listen to you. I want to know what your concerns are. I want to know what your hopes are and what your dreams are. What you should be looking for in your next congressperson is someone that can take those ideas and push them in a forward direction and lead this country into the future. Again, the important thing to remember is that your interests are my interests.
Okay. And here's a second question on gun legislation. I find this one interesting. Would you support building a wall between Illinois and Indiana? I thought that too. So that our kids can't drive over the border, load their trunks with guns, and drive back to Illinois and sell their guns? Interesting question. Mr. Schwartzberg?
No, I would not support building a wall. I don't support walls. I support bridges in this world, including bridges to Indiana, but not for the purposes of transporting guns.
Okay, Samina?
Yeah, I would agree with Steve. I don't think that's a solution. We need strong legislation at the federal level to fight the NRA and to keep all Americans safe.
Mr. Wolf?
To answer the question, no, I don't support building a wall. I do support the policy that Illinois has on gun control. I think the FOID card is a remarkable program thus far. I think there are improvements that can be made. I support strong background checks. I support having a card before you go into any gun shops. We would love to add some sort of mental health evaluation, but that again goes to public health records. Again, the important thing is to be able to go to Capitol Hill and fight against these public interest, special interest gun control groups, or the gun advocate groups like the NRA. There is no place in our society for automatic weapons and machine guns. And once that is clear, once the President and the House and the Congress understand that, we will be able to move forward in a safer and overall happier and healthier society.
Okay, next question. What initiatives would you support to stop the mass incarceration of poor and minority group citizens? And I'll begin with Samina.
Absolutely. Thank you. On that, as I said earlier, criminal justice reform is incredibly important. We need to eliminate private prison operators. That is something that I would fight for as your representative. We need criminal justice reform across the board. We need to have accountability. Here in Chicago, in the city of Chicago, we have a lack of accountability. We need a consent decree. We need strong oversight on our police system, and we need cops to be accountable instead of essentially running over our communities, especially communities of color.
Mr. Wolf?
As a former federal agent, I can say with authority that there needs to be massive criminal justice reform in this country. I think that starts with legalizing cannabis. It's very strange for a former federal agent to say, yes, we should be legalizing drugs. I think that right now, cannabis not just brings medicine and money to the state of Illinois, but allows people that are being arrested to no longer be suspects. It allows our criminal justice departments to specialize and put money where it matters and prioritize. I work for the Justice Department in many different capacities. They have outstanding training and policy agendas that they can forward to every other police agency in America.
Okay, Mr. Schwartzberg?
The first and most important reform of our criminal justice system that we can take is abolishing monetary bond. There are 450,000 people in our nation's jails today awaiting trial, 450,000 people who are presumed innocent, who are there not because they're a threat or a flight risk, but because they can't afford to post monetary bond. Monetary bond should be abolished unless a judge determines that a alleged offender is a threat or a flight risk. That's the first step toward reforming our criminal justice system. The reform is going to have to be deeper than that. It's going to have to involve an end to the war on drugs, as I referenced earlier and as my competitors have referenced as well. It will take a major overhaul of our system, but fundamentally the first step is abolishing monetary bond and releasing these people who are, as I say, presumed innocent under our law, who are currently trapped in confinement.
Okay. This question is directed just to candidate Wolf. Can you address some of the questions that have been raised about the veracity of the claims you've made about your work for the federal government and how you've responded to constituents asking questions?
Absolutely. I have had a tremendous public service career. Like I said, recruited by the FBI out of college. I worked on some of the highest profile espionage and terrorism investigations in the history of the government. I have been at the intersection of some very interesting points in time in history. Like I said, I was one of the first responders to the Pentagon. I was covered in anthrax because I was part of the Hazardous Materials Response Unit for the FBI. I then became a diplomat and worked on Condoleezza Rice's protection detail. I have worked overseas for decades with my children, again, raised my children in Africa. I was one of the first volunteers to go to Iraq with the State Department. We have in our office plaques, memorials, photographs, credentials. I have had an incredible public service career, and I look forward to sharing that with all of you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question. Will you try to correct the, I believe it's immigration problem in the United States and get rid of sanctuary cities? And we'll begin with Samina.
So as I mentioned earlier, I think we need to reform our immigration system, and we need to make it more humane. So to me, sanctuary cities are incredibly important. We need to protect them. It is imperative for us to protect the undocumented, to have a Clean Dream Act, to provide a path to citizenship for those who are undocumented and not eligible for DACA. We need to protect the people who are contributing and want to be here.
Okay. Mr. Wolf?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Sorry. How can you reform the immigration problem in the United States, and do you support getting rid of sanctuary cities?
I think sanctuary cities are a tremendous idea on a municipal level. The federal government does not recognize them and probably never will at this point, unfortunately. The immigration system, again, has to be reformed to make it simpler. Again, we're sending mixed signals to immigrants, refugees, asylees. We say that America is a sanctuary, yet we throw people out and we arrest people for coming. The immigration system that I've worked in for 2 decades has to be simpler, has to be reasonable, and has to be easier for everyone to understand so that we can all be on the same page. And again, we need to be looking for representatives in Congress and Senate that want a simpler, easier, and more acceptable path to citizenship.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartzberg?
Thank you. As I said before, we have to face a choice as a people, we the American people. Are we going to be a nation of immigrants again or not? Are we going to destroy this horrible, inhuman detention and deportation system that we've built up, or are we going to try and humanize it, accommodate it, live with it in some way? Fundamentally, immigrants are of great value to this country. Immigrant Americans are twice as likely as U.S.-born Americans to start their own business. 1 in 10 Americans in the private sector are employed by an immigrant-owned business. Immigrants will be essential to the future of American medicine, already are essential to the future of American medicine. We have a tremendous shortage of medical professionals. We'll need to be drawing people in from all over the world if we're going to have a functioning healthcare system in this country. Fundamentally, our education system, since it was established in the early 1900s, the Nobel Prize has been won about 40% of the time by Americans, and about 35% of those prizes have gone to immigrants. They are part of the goose that lays the golden eggs in our prosperity, and we're in the process of strangling that goose and killing our own future by refusing to recognize who we are. We are a hospitable people that has welcomed individuals from every nation on earth, and that is what we should continue to be.
Okay. This is the final question from the audience. If you get the minimum wage raised, will you push for all the people that are currently getting food stamps and other government support to be off the government rolls? Mr. Schwartzberg?
No, I will not. I think the government should serve as the employer of last resort, and until it does, until we guarantee full employment in this country, I do not favor these kinds of quote-unquote welfare reforms that serve only to penalize people when circumstances in the country and situation in the country turns down economically. When the Clinton administration put in welfare reform in the 1990s, when the era of big government was allegedly over, this was done at a time where the economy was booming, and it was done with less pain and suffering than has taken place since, as the economy has gone through its natural course of cycles and circles, and as Republican policy has led to terrible disasters for the economy and the Great Crash and Great Recession in 2008. Fundamentally, until the government is in a position to support full employment, is in a position to guarantee that everyone who wants a job has a job, then I do not support these kinds of punitive measures.
Samina?
I agree with Steve on this point. We need to protect the most vulnerable. I do want to point out that the welfare reform that Steve mentioned was passed by what's known as the New Democrat Coalition, which is a successor organization to the Democratic Leadership Council, which pushed for deregulation and welfare reform and cutting social programs. Mike Quigley is a member of the New Democrat Coalition in Congress. We need a real progressive in the 5th District, a progressive who understands the importance of government and will fully fund those programs that will protect the most vulnerable. As your representative, I will continue to do that.
Mr. Wolf.
The American government was originally set up to protect and defend the weakest and the marginalized and the people that needed help. The welfare programs that we have do just that. What we were trying to do now is make things better for everyone. A $15 minimum wage, which again I think should be higher, allows people simply to exist. It does not allow them to save. It does not allow them to save money for college. Again, that's just mere existence. We need to be offering universal health care, free education. We need to legalize cannabis, which again will bring billions of dollars to this state. People need basic, fundamental help from the U.S. government, and that is what I intend to provide.
Thank you. So before we get to closing statements, I want to thank the candidates for sharing their views, being here today, and the audience also for giving us good, insightful questions. I also want to remind everyone that this will be aired in March on either Comcast Channel 6 or AT&T UVerse Channel 99, and that you can check the website elmhursttv.com beginning February 1st to find out when it's going to air. But it's going to be aired continuously through the month of March. So now we'll begin with closing statements, which are only 1 minute. And we'll begin with Samina.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone. As a league member, it's been a real honor to be here, and I want to thank all of you for taking your time on a Sunday afternoon to be committed and engaged in our democracy. I want to remind you all, my name's Samina Mustafa. I'm running as a progressive Democrat. I've been honored to receive 2 endorsements from the Justice Democrats and Northside Democracy for America that looked at all the candidates in this race and decided to endorse me as the one who had the reputation, the character, and the commitment to progressive policies like Medicare for all and refusing corporate PAC donations. However, I want to stress that the only endorsement that truly matters is from you, the voters. We agree that it is time for a change in our country and our democracy, and on March 20th, we have an opportunity to transform the leadership of this district and our party. I ask you for your support on March 20th. Thank you.
Mr. Wolf.
Again, thank you for being here. It means a tremendous amount for us to have this public forum and have you in attendance. We should be looking for and voting for, again, the next generation of leaders. We should be expecting more of people. We should be expecting the best public servants and the brightest people and the people that have the biggest vision for this country to be stepping forward and be representing all of us. Again, my name is Benjamin Thomas Wolf. We worked harder than everyone else. We're actually first on the ballot. You'll see Wolf first on the ballot, and we hope that you remember to vote, not just on March 20th. Early voting starts on February 8th. You have more than a month to vote, so again, remember to please vote Wolf. Thank you.
And I also want to remind the audience that the incumbent candidate, Mike Quigley, intended to be here, but he's in Washington, D.C. due to the shutdown. Okay, Mr. Schwartzberg.
Thank you all. We, the American people, are all in this together. As James Wilson said of the spirit behind American progress in 1790, all will receive from each, and each will receive from all, mutual support and assistance. Mutually supported and assisted, all may be carried to a degree of perfection hitherto unknown, perhaps hitherto not believed. It is time to restore the hope-filled moral consensus on which our nation's progress rests. If you support Medicare for all, if you support a massive program of investment in our nation's infrastructure, if you support a freedom budget to abolish poverty, if you believe in respecting the tribal sovereignty of the native peoples, if you want to see a foreign policy that is concerned with the global common good and that respects the rights and interests of other peoples, then I encourage you to explore supporting my candidacy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and we'll be back in 15 minutes with our next candidates, which are for the DuPage County Sheriff. Thank you. Again, I'm Barbara Young, and pleased to be the moderator of this candidates forum. Now we're going to hear from the candidates for DuPage County Sheriff Frank Bibiano and James Mendrick. They'll begin with 2-minute opening statements. Then they'll answer questions that the League has already prepared and given them in advance. And then we'll go to the questions from the audience, and there are quite a few, so we'll get right to it. Mr. Bibiano, I'll begin with you for your opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Frank Bibiano. I'm a proud Elmhurst resident and candidate for DuPage County Sheriff. When the longest-running sheriff retires after 44 years of faithful and unblemished service, the citizens of DuPage County have the serious business of electing a new sheriff. Citizens want a candidate who will keep families and property safe. They want a candidate who has a trifecta of extensive experience, innovative leadership, and community trust. I, Under Sheriff Frank Bibiano, am that candidate, and I'm the only candidate wholeheartedly endorsed by Sheriff John Zaruba. Recently, Sheriff Zaruba was joined in his endorsement of my campaign by Attorney General Jim Ryan and County Board Member Pete DiCiani, both Elmhurst residents. I'm the only candidate recognized by the Illinois State Crime Commission and awarded the prestigious 2017 Protector of the Children Award. The commission objectively affirmed my work in public safety by collaborating with the Annie Laguerre Foundation to get EpiPens on the street for our deputies. They recognized my work on educating teens on internet safety and also my efforts to curb the county's drug and opioid problem. As Undersheriff, I have either worked in or managed every unit in the office. With this comes a guarantee of a smooth transition in both operation and leadership when the sheriff retires. As sheriff, I will continue to fight gangs and drugs, protect services for seniors and families, and I will collaborate with the DuPage County Board for a responsible and balanced budget. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mendrick, your opening statement.
Hi, my name is James Mendrick. I'm also with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office. I've been there for over 20 years. I've done every job from deputy to field training officer to sergeant, lieutenant. I manage the accreditation process as the administrative bureau chief. I'm the only candidate that's actually managed the entire budgetary and operational headcount for the sheriff's office, all three bureaus. I've been in charge of the courthouse, the crime lab, IT, pretty much every position there. I've been a hardworking deputy, and I'm also endorsed by Dan Cronin, Chairman Dan Cronin, and my campaign chairman is John Milner, who was the police chief in this fine town. My biggest endorsement, and this is what really is driving me to do what I'm doing, is I have the deputies through all their local chapters in the jail and the courthouse and on law enforcement all backing me. For me, I wouldn't want to do this job if I didn't have the backing of the men and women in blue. That's what's really important to me. That's who I'm doing this for, and for the citizens of DuPage County. I believe in collaboration. I believe in working with the local governments, the other police chiefs, fire departments, the county board, the state's attorney. I think everything is a teamwork process. I don't think anything is about things, it's all about people. And I think having all these relationships, I bring these with me to the Office of Sheriff, because to truly make DuPage County a safer place, it's got to be done in a team-oriented approach. I think that people that work together and can work out differences and come up with fiscal solutions that will be beneficial not just for us at the Sheriff's Office, but for the other 32 municipal governments all within DuPage County. I believe I'm the only candidate that could do that, and I hope to show that to you during this process. Thank you.
Okay, we'll begin with the questions from the League. Number one, where do you stand on gun control legislation? And we'll begin with Mr. Mendrick.
Well, with the legislation, as you know, the sheriff wouldn't be a legislator. It's kind of like one of the things I always say, that I strive to be an elected official, but I'll never be a politician. I am sworn to uphold the law. So my job in this scenario is to uphold whatever law exists. You don't want a sheriff that could pick or choose which laws they're going to enforce or not enforce. My personal belief is that if somebody is properly trained and can, hit the target they're supposed to, that don't have any criminal history and don't have any mental health issues, I think it's fine for them to have a gun. I think the The part of the sheriff, though, is enforcement. I think it's up to us where we have to make sure that, you know, gun shops aren't selling to the wrong people, that pawn shops aren't receiving weapons and selling them to the wrong people. I think ours is an arm of enforcement. Even Chicago has had some of the loosest gun laws in the nation, and they had also some of the highest crime statistics with weapons. I think it's illegal guns is what we need to be focusing on as a sheriff's candidate.
Thank you. Mr. Bibiano?
Well, this is quite a question to answer in the time period allotted, but I see this simple set of words as actually three different questions. The first question could be is my position on the current gun control legislation. And when concealed carry came into being, quite honestly, I had my doubts. However, it's been a law for some time, and my doubts were not justified. We have had little to no problems with concealed carry, and it seems to have worked out thus far. The second sub-question could possibly be my position on legislating tougher gun laws, especially in the wake of these mass shootings that everybody is so aware of. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a strong supporter of the Constitution and the Second Amendment. However, as you know, the Second Amendment was written in the late 1700s. They couldn't have seen the weapons that we have today or the crimes that were committed with those weapons. I'm an advocate for legislatures having the tough discussions. I would love to be in on those discussions. And I think it's good to have those conversations. And the third question that I see in this short question is, what would I do in a professional capacity as sheriff regarding gun control? The sheriff is sworn to uphold the law. I took an oath to uphold the law of the state of Illinois and the Constitution of the United States, and that's what I will continue to do, enforce whatever law there is on the books, regardless if I personally agree with it or not.
Okay, thank you. Second question. What are your thoughts on improving accountability within the Sheriff's Department to the public? And we'll begin with Mr. Bibiano.
Police departments have to be accountable to the population that they serve. It's been a hot-button issue in the press, as everybody knows, recently over the past couple of years. And the accountability stems from issues that arise, either in the region or with a specific police department or sheriff's office. I'm proud that the DuPage County Sheriff's Office does not have any of those issues. I spent 10 years in internal affairs. I know the ethics and the mandates that the office places on its deputies, the men and women out there doing the job every day, and the sheriff's office just doesn't have those type of ethical issues. However, again, analyzing this question, accountability can be translated to transparency. And there I have some thoughts about transparency. Our budget is online so the taxpayer can see what their money is being spent on. I just recently got new technology for our in-car camera system, an upgrade to the cameras that is going to go a long way with protecting not only citizens' rights, but our deputies' rights as well. And also, I'm a believer in body cameras. Earlier this year, or excuse me, late last year, we put in for a grant. We received it. However, unfortunately, we weren't able to come up with the funding, but body cameras can go a long way for transparency as well. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mendrick?
Yeah, I do agree with some of these things that we already have implemented, like Mr. Bibiano mentioned. Those are things that we've had for many years at the Sheriff's Office, but I propose to do more. Again, every solution that I have revolves around a team-oriented approach. I think that the Sheriff's Office needs to be open. I think people are fearful of anything that seems secret. The online budget is a good thing to have, but it needs to be detailed out. We have over a $40 million budget, and it's only a few sheets of paper. There's very little explanation of what your tax dollars are actually going to, what you're asking of us, what we're spending on it. It needs to be articulated out in a more detailed fashion in that online budget. Also, I believe that we can improve our relationships with the media. I think the media could be a tool that we use for a symbiotic relationship. I would propose a 24/7 media center within the sheriff's office. That way we can do live press conferences instead of just these press releases that are 1 or 2 lines that really don't give you much information. I think that we should engage the media. We should explain to you what we can for your safety and for the safety of your communities and for transparency. I think it's a very important thing to communicate with the public, and through the media we could do that, because the media could also help us. Again, I talk about symbiosis with the media instead of being adversarial, because if we're looking for a suspect, or if there's somebody in a crime in progress, or a missing person with Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, those are big things for us. Those are things we need to handle very quickly, and to have media to assist us in doing our job to make the community safer, I think that would be a great thing. And of course, it does increase transparency. I think also with internal affairs, there should be 3 people added to it. It's always historically been 1 internal affairs director with very little oversight. And I think that there should be somebody from internal affairs from each bureau, because the internal affairs director could be caught in a conflict of interest if he's from an area and then has to investigate his own area. So I think having a check and balances of 4 internal affairs directors, I believe, would solve a lot of problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Third question, and we'll begin with Mr. Mendrick. If elected, what are your plans to keep up the funding for the current DuPage County Crime Lab? And will it remain free for other DuPage municipalities?
Well, I think the crime lab is one part of a larger agency. Again, we're a $40 million budget a year operation. I think the overall health of the agency is what will keep the crime lab funded and keep those services free. I feel that having the budget knowledge that I have had over the years, and again, I'm the only candidate who's done our global budget, that's actually arranged the entire budget for several years. And with that knowledge, it's given me inside solutions on how to make budget impact on the community. You know, there's a lot of things we could be doing. We could be looking at diverting some of the nonviolent mental health people out of the jail system into private treatment. That saves money. Bulk purchasing with other agencies. If we were bulk purchasing with the other 32 municipalities for our equipment, it'd lower your tax dollars here in Elmhurst or the other towns and ours simultaneously. I think a full-time grant writer would be something that we should be looking into. I believe that our technology, if we lease our technology, we could save massive amounts of money and at the same time catapult ourselves decades into the future with technology, because right now the bad guys have better technology than we do. I have antiquated technology. I'm a patrol commander and I have a 7-year-old laptop that can't be upgraded. That's not good. But we can actually save money by increasing our technology through leasing. I think it's a myriad of solutions will keep that crime lab going. We could even do more operations with the crime lab if the overall budget is taken care of. Right now I feel that we do good, but we're using a structure and technology from the 20th century to do a 21st century job. I propose to bring us into the future and bring us into a place of fiscal health, because right now fiscal times are tough. There's a state impasse of $3.4 million to the county, and we need somebody who knows that budget inside and out, and I do.
Thank you. Mr. Bibiano, same question.
Regarding the crime lab, just recently I was put in charge of the crime lab as well as the courthouse, along with my other duties. Having done the budget for 2018, there is a gap. There is a funding gap there for sure. The crime lab is not a statutory requirement of the sheriff's office, but it's a beacon for other municipalities, and it's something no other county in the state has, is their own crime lab. And there is a thought in the law enforcement community about possibly charging a membership fee or something along those lines to keep the crime lab going and moving forward. The crime lab, its technology is up to par. Its current day, all of its certifications are up to date, and it's fully accredited. I will not accept anything from any other municipalities. That is bad for the taxpayer. I will work with the county board to find other funding. I will possibly make some cuts elsewhere in the budget to keep the crime lab moving forward. It would be bad for the taxpayer to pay twice. It's already funded by taxpayer dollars, and they shouldn't be paying again by their police departments paying for for the furtherance of the crime lab. So I intend on keeping it free, and it will absolutely continue to function and serve the municipalities as it currently does. Thank you.
Thank you. And here's the fourth question from the league. Where do you see the use and potential growth of the K-9 unit in 2019 and 5 years beyond? Mr. Bibiano?
I see the growth of the K-9 unit in 2019 and beyond as just that, growing. K-9s are an essential part to law enforcement, and they're an essential part of the Sheriff's Office mission, not only in what we do, but in assisting other county agencies. Currently, we have bloodhounds, we have drug detection dogs, cadaver dogs, and explosive dogs. As Law Enforcement Bureau Chief, I oversee the program, and it's a good program. And with the expansion of the populations of the special need population and the senior population, they're especially helpful in finding people that may be lost, walk away, and just one save, one found child or elderly individual obviously more than makes up for the cost of that dog and deputy, whether it be in unincorporated or incorporated DuPage County. So I see it expanding, and I see more dogs being added to the program. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendrick, same question.
It's a question near and dear to my heart. I've been the K-9 commander for over a decade. I think the dogs are essential. They're an essential tool for law enforcement. They save a lot of money because they save a lot of man hours and work. Everything we're doing at the Sheriff's Office, we're doing a pretty good job, but what I propose that we could still be doing more. The drug dog that Mr. Bibiano mentioned is our only drug dog. That dog, that resource is retiring in May, and we have not outlined a replacement yet. So I fear of lapses like that in services. You know, I would propose to have 4 drug dogs. So the drug dogs are very, very cheap. They don't cost a lot of money. We could train them in-house. We have 12-hour shifts. We had 4 drug dogs, 1 on each 12-hour shift. We could actually notify the DuPage County Police Chiefs Association that we have this resource and then franchise it out to them too. You know, you want to talk about stopping the opioid crisis, well, getting the dope off the streets is the #1 thing. Now, if our dogs, if they're being utilized by us and 32 municipal governments, every time they sniff drugs, we get a seizure, we get a portion of that seizure. So now we're taking bad guy money and using it to finance the Sheriff's Office and these other municipalities, and we're all generating something from that. The bloodhounds, their olfactories are so powerful, they can find a person, they can have 5 people touch this piece of paper, and we could find the one that's gone and track that dog, track that person for 8 miles. So for missing people, we had a save in Hanover Park of an elderly dementia patient, I believe it was, just last month. So a life has been saved just recently. I think the dogs are essential, but I think it needs to be expanded, and we shouldn't have lapses in that. Instead, we should go the other way. We should be increasing the unit and providing these resources to not only the DuPage County Sheriff's Office, but to the residents of DuPage County at large.
Okay, now we're going to turn to the questions from you, the audience. #1 question. What is the first thing you think needs to be changed in the Sheriff Department? And I'll begin with Mr. Mendrick.
Well, you know, I've been there over 20 years, and in that time, we've never had a really significant restructuring. And, you know, it's like I said before, it seems like we've got the structure and the technology of the 20th century to do a 21st century job. I think we have to look over our whole global operation and realign what we're doing to this current day and age. If I could be there over 20 years and the structure is relatively the same, even what we call beats, we break up the composition of how we patrol by these 8 beats. That hasn't changed in over a decade. And I propose that we start looking at what we need to modernize, what we need to do, predictive policing, using technology. There's a lot of concepts out there that we're not using that I would definitely employ as sheriff.
Thank you. Mr. Bibiano.
I believe that the first thing that needs to be changed is how we go about letting the community know what we do and who we are. The Sheriff's Office has a number of great programs that have been started by the sheriff, and the community at large doesn't know about them. We have the SPAR program, where you can If you have a loved one with special needs, be it a child or an elderly individual, you can pre-register them. Should they go missing or get lost while they're driving, they're pre-registered. We have the First Step program where if you find a substance in your child's room, and the sheriff's office will test it free of charge at our crime lab. There's a lot of great products that the sheriff's office has, and a lot of great programs that the community and the county just is not aware of. So I would start by making folks aware of who we are and what we do.
Thank you. And I'm just reminding everyone, for these questions, the candidates only have 1 minute to answer. And I'm going to combine these two questions. Number one, over the past 2 years, how many times have you been promoted? And have you had any disciplinary complaints filed against you? And we'll start with Mr. Bibiano.
How many times I've been promoted?
Yep,
And any disciplinary?
right.
In the last 2 years, so going back to 15, I've been promoted twice, from major to colonel and from colonel to chief. And as far as disciplinary is concerned, I have received a single reprimand.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mendrick?
I won't need the full minute. I've never been disciplined in all of my service for anything, my entire career, and I haven't been promoted in the last 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Would you ask your employees for campaign donations and/or help with your future campaigns? The current sheriff has been criticized for these practices. And I'll begin with Mr. Mendrick.
I've already put that out, that as elected sheriff, I will not accept any money from any employee. I think that's a conflict of interest once you're an elected sheriff. I don't think you should take money from any of your employees. I know that has been prevalent past practice at our office, and I vow to stop that.
Mr. Bibiano.
Yes, that has been prevalent in the office, and I do not take campaign donations from fellow sheriff's deputies. There's a few close friends that I've taken some minor money from, but no, I would not. The deputies that have approached me and offered me money, wanting to know where they can donate, I have told them to not donate to my campaign. In addition, I have turned them down for help, again, with a couple of close friends. Other than that, I've turned them down for any kind of campaign help. That needs to be changed.
Similar question, getting away from just the employees, but campaign funding is difficult. Have you set parameters on who can contribute to your campaign? Mr. Bibiano.
Yes, I've personally set those parameters. I put them on myself. Again, as I just said, I don't take campaign donations from a majority of the deputies, nor do I take campaign help. And I also watch who gives me campaign donations. I don't have donations from vendors. I don't take them from security companies. I believe that's a conflict. And if I try and watch who's donating to my campaign, this is the sheriff's office that we're talking about. It's an elected position, and large companies don't simply give campaign dollars. They're looking for something in return, and I just don't bother with that. I don't take that money.
Okay, Mr. Mendrick, same question.
I think with campaigns, obviously they're expensive, and you need campaign funding to run a campaign. With that being said, I think you do your due diligence to what you can do. The problem is for someone running a campaign is, at least in our position, we can't use our law enforcement tools or resources to research anybody and do background checks or anything. That would actually be a violation of our rules and regulations and policies and procedures. So with issues like this, we vet them as best we can. A lot of people have donated to me. I feel that it's because I have community support, deputy support, other elected official support, and I think that you do your due diligence, and I believe you do what you can with what you have and what you know. But I mean, there's only so much that you can do when people write you checks and they want to support you.
Okay. Mr. Mendrick, are you allowed to wear your duty badge and uniform in your campaign literature?
I've been told that I cannot, that my opponent is allowed to, but I was not, was related to me from a chief, that I was told that that's a courtesy that I won't be afforded.
Mr. Bibiano?
I was given permission. I cannot speak for anybody else if it was sought. Speaking for myself, I was given permission, and I do.
Okay. Question for both of you. Do either of you know about an attempted murder in the jail where an inmate had his throat cut? And were there any criminal charges brought against the suspects? And we'll start with Mr. Bibiano.
I don't know about that incident where an inmate had his throat cut.
Okay.
I don't know. If there was such an incident that occurred in the jail, I most certainly would know about it. It would be a criminal matter. The detectives certainly would investigate it. However, I am unaware of an incident like that happening in the jail.
Mr. Mendrick?
It's a little tough one for me, I guess. I have heard about the incident. I believe it was probably 10 or 11 months ago, and I do remember Mr. Bibiano telling me that he was dealing with it at work one day when I was on patrol, and he was checking a status check to see how things were going on the road, and he said he was busy dealing with an inmate who had his throat cut.
Do you know whether the suspects were?
As far as I know, I don't know all the details, but not as far as I know, there were no criminal charges.
Okay. Next question. As sheriff, will you stand up for U.S. citizens the same way the law bends for illegals? Mr. Mendrick?
I'm sorry, can you clarify the question?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand either. But as sheriff, will you stand up for U.S. citizens the same way the law bends for, and I assume they mean immigrants, illegal immigrants that shouldn't be in the country?
Well, standing up for the citizens is what the sheriff's office is all about. The sheriff has a sworn oath and duty to stand up for the citizens. And that's something that I propose too, is creating more open forum for citizens to be accessible to the sheriff. I think that, like I said, press conferences is one avenue. I think using technology and phone technology to deliver the message to the citizens. See, my idea is to get a survey from as many citizens as possible, and as many of the stakeholders within DuPage County as possible, to get their input on what they want from their sheriff's office. This is going to be your sheriff's office, and I want to make sure I have the input of the citizens to properly do the job that they want me to do.
Okay, Mr. Bibiano?
Can you read that question one more time?
I can. As sheriff, will you stand up for U.S. citizens the same way the law bends for illegal immigrants? And obviously, someone in the audience has that feeling.
Yes, thank you. I certainly will stand up for U.S. citizens. I believe that's what the sheriff does. I believe that's what the men and women who work for the sheriff's office do, as well as law enforcement and police in general. That's what we do. We stand up for the U.S. citizens. As far as bending laws, I will not bend a law for anybody. The sheriff is constitutionally mandated to enforce the laws, and therefore there will be no bending of laws for anybody. Thank you.
Okay. Slightly different question. Will you voice your opinion on support for enforcement of, I think they mean enforcement, of federal laws on detaining illegals that your officers come in contact with and are arrested for a crime, and they want you to be specific? Mr. Bibiano?
If I understand the question correctly, I will enforce the laws as they pertain to the sheriff's office. There are very few federal laws that the sheriff's office can enforce. They're mainly state laws, and that is what I will follow, is the state law as it pertains to anything, immigration or otherwise. I will follow the law of the state of Illinois to a T.
Mr. Mendrick?
I will certainly enforce all laws. You don't want a sheriff that can pick or choose what they're going to enforce. You know, I can't say that I don't want to enforce shoplifting one day or burglaries the other. That's not a luxury for any law enforcement official that should be afforded. I think that we know what the laws are, we enforce them evenly, and we do it the way that the people who have voted for your legislators have put them into law. I mean, for us, I guess for me, it's a foreign question to even be asked, would you enforce the law? Because it's my nature to say, of course, that's what I swore an oath on the first day I got the job almost 22 years ago. I will certainly enforce all of the laws, the federal laws, the state laws, even local ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Do you support the recently proposed treatment center for substance abusers in DuPage County in Wheaton, and why or why not? Mr. Mendrick?
I think it's a big problem. One of my biggest issues and platform issues is mental illness in the community. And I think that it's a very important topic to be explored. First off, I guess I never would commit to anything with any community without checking out what the budgetary implications are. Every idea that's great out there has to still be afforded within a budget. So based on the budgetary issues and to make sure that there were security concerns taken care of, because of course those are the two things within law enforcement that you have to work in. Can you afford what you're doing? Is it going to be safe? I think if we can get together, and again, everything that I do is through a team approach. You get all the stakeholders together, we discuss the issue, and see if we can make it happen. But it's not something that you can do alone. A sheriff should be working with the community.
Mr. Bibiano, same question.
If we're talking about the same thing here, it's a opioid recovery center, treatment facility in Wheaton, and if I understand it correctly, it backs up to a residential area, and the residents there are concerned about the safety of their neighborhood with this facility there. I do not know how it affects the government of the city of Wheaton, nor am I aware of the city of Wheaton's zoning laws. So I don't know if a facility like that fits in that area. However, I do know that facilities, drug facilities like that, that help addicted individuals recover are extremely necessary and a big step in curbing the opioid abuse and the opioid problem in this county.
Okay. Another question on drug problem. What will you do to get the real drug problem in DuPage County, and will you follow the money? Mr. Bibiano.
The real drug problem, it sounds like the person that wrote that has some inside information that they should probably share, but the real drug problem in DuPage County is just that, it's opioids. It's got a grip on the state of Illinois. Recently, I sat in Friday, as a matter of fact, on Operation Hope. I sat on a panel with other county officials trying to get a grasp and move forward on this to help those in need of it, try and get the stigma away from saying you're addicted to getting them help. At the Sheriff's Office, we've just instituted a program that after somebody gets out of the hospital after an overdose, a deputy and a clinician follows up with that person personally to offer them services and help. Hopefully they can get treatment and get off the opioids. Thank you.
Mr. Mendrick, same question.
The opioid crisis is huge. I think it's the biggest problem that we're facing, and we have to have a multi-tiered approach to it. We have to go through, diversion, education, and enforcement. I've been working with a company called the Save a Child's Life Foundation, and they're doing something interesting, targeting people from 6th grade all through high school to where they'll get rewarded for allowing to be randomly drug tested. They'll get, help with getting into colleges, preference points for jobs, even gift cards from local vendors to encourage them to stay off drugs. That's the first part is, diversion, trying to get a drug-free generation of kids out there. Then education. Parents need to be educated. The people need to be educated. We need to be more engaged in showing parents what the signs of the drug culture are. And then finally, there's enforcement, everything from drug dogs to a task force. There's no borders with this problem. There's no jurisdictions. We have to be working communally with all of our fellow police agencies and collar counties.
Okay. Mr. Mendrick, can you comment on the incident that occurred in 2012, I should say allegedly, in 2012 that involved Sheriff Zaruba's son, who was a teenager, being allowed to drive around with county deputies? Your thoughts?
I mean, I wasn't there for that incident. The bulk of what I would know about that incident was on television. It was a news story. The sheriff's son was dressed similar to a policeman. He was doing a ride-along with a deputy, and as far as I remember, they stopped the car, suspect ran out of the car, and the sheriff's son chased the suspect. And that's really all I know personally, and that's what I saw on the video. That's really all I know about it.
Were there any repercussions? Do you know?
Not that I know of. I think the deputy might have gotten into some kind of discipline issue, but
Okay,
that's all
thank
I
you.
really know.
Mr. Bibiano?
I was not there for the incident. Most of what I know about it, I saw on the news. That's what I can discuss. There was some discipline that came from it, but from what I saw on the news from the in-car camera, a stop was made, and for some reason, the sheriff's son chased the individual down. There were some repercussions, and I believe it was looked at by somebody, I don't know who, from the outside, and it was cleared. Thank you.
Okay. Then we have a couple questions that are similar, and they deal with the incorporated areas and whether or not you can reduce the work of the sheriff's office as a result. And I hope you understand that question.
I do understand the question,
Okay.
yes.
Mr. Bibiano, I'll let you begin.
At the sheriff's office, our main jurisdiction is the unincorporated sections of DuPage County. And there is a thought out there that the local municipalities could contract with the county to provide police services to those unincorporated sections. The sheriff's office, we have done study on top of study on top of study, and the fact is that the sheriff's office does it as efficient but cheaper. The sheriff's office deputies do not get paid as high as municipal police agencies, and I believe that it would be bad for the taxpayer to pay for their police, and now they have to pay for another municipality to come in for police services that they already get.
Okay, Mr. Mendrick?
I'd always be open to discussing any option to save money, but so far it has been proven, because I was actually part of I was actually one of the main people doing the study last time we reviewed this, that determined that we are cheaper. My data that I gathered, when comparable to the other 32 municipalities, is that the per capita and per hour, the sheriff's deputies were typically cheaper than the municipal agencies. But there's also another tier on that too, is that, that's not all we do as patrol. We have the only bomb squad in the county. We're one of the few agencies that do have canines. We have SWAT team. So, the patrolling is one portion of what we do. We also run a correctional facility, a courthouse, a crime lab, so I don't know if that would save very much money, but again, as a sheriff, you have to be open-minded, because if you just say no and you don't explore it, people think you're holding a secret and that there's some other solution out there. So I would be looking to explore any idea with anybody, but I think I know the end result would be that we're cheaper.
Okay, next question. You both have different work experiences. How does your work experience relate to the sheriff's position you are seeking? And we'll begin with Mr. Mendrick.
Well, I've done a lot of different jobs. I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of different components in the office, and I've developed a lot of good relationships. That's why I have all the deputies backing me the way they are. It's because when you work with somebody and you consistently treat people well for a long period of time, you gain support and trust. And I believe that's what I've done over my years at the sheriff's office. I have very good relationships with people. And again, this is what it's all about. I mean, if you're parochial and you're not working with other people, I don't think there's ever a good outcome. I think we need to be outward with the public, take their input. We have to ask our deputies. Everybody doing the job every single day knows how to do that job the best. We have to be taking those ideas. If you do a survey of deputies and they all give you, 50 of them give you the same answer on how to improve something, well, that's in detectives what we call a clue. I think that we need to listen to people. It's all about people.
Mr. Bibiano?
In my almost 19 years with the office, I started in the jail as a corrections deputy. I've worked as a patrol deputy, a detective. As I mentioned, I was the director of internal affairs for 10 years. I was a detective commander. I was a patrol commander, and now I'm the law enforcement bureau chief as well as the undersheriff. I came into this agency not knowing anybody, and I steadily moved up the ranks. And I believe that that kind of movement, constant upward movement, gives me an insight into the office that a lot of people, that I'm the only candidate that has that insight, being in the administrative offices every day, being in on those decisions, making those decisions, and speaking directly with the sheriff on a daily basis.
Okay. To each of the candidates, how familiar are you with services offered by Family Shelter? Mr. Bibiano?
If the question is referring to Family Shelter Services, Inc., I'm somewhat familiar. We deal with them on a consistent basis on a number of different issues, having to do with domestic batteries, things of that nature. They're a very good resource to have, and the DuPage County Sheriff's Office employs a social worker, and they are one of the resources that he refers those who need services to.
Mr. Mendrick?
I'm familiar with their services also. They're a very good organization, and I would propose a better partnership with them, though. I think we could utilize them more. I think we should be doing more follow-up with the victims of domestic battery and more assistance to these families to make sure they're getting the proper help afterwards. You know, I think just coming in and making an arrest and then not going back to that residence and following up would be a mistake. So I think that, you know, having more of a family-oriented approach to this, where we're actually getting in there to follow up. We have a social worker, but it's one person. And, you know, we have over 100,000 people that we service. I think that ratio shows that we could be doing more. You know, I've helped incept many of these programs too in the past throughout all my career points, but I'm not afraid to say that we could be doing more. I believe that we have a lot of good programs, but there are enhancements that we could do, and I think using family services more would be very important.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we get to closing statements, and that is how and where can you save money at the Sheriff's Office? And we'll begin with Mr. Mendrick.
Well, like I articulated before, there's savings in technology by leasing technology. I would propose to look at possibly leasing squad cars too. I've heard that there's significant savings there too. Diverting the mentally ill from the jail is another saving method. Bulk purchasing is another saving method. Grant writing is another saving method. Even our people who are light duty, you know, we really don't get anything out of them. We could be handing them an iPad and they could do grant research while they're at home on a light duty position, kick the research to the grant writer, and we'll leave no grant untouched. I think everything is budget with this. I mean, to have safety, you have to be able to afford the ideas that you're proposing. And I think my expertise with the budget is what's going to get us there.
Mr. Bibiano, same question.
There's a few different ways the Sheriff's Office can save money. One of them is a program that will very soon begin for civilians to work in the courthouse. They have to be hired and some cursory training, but they will go and they will free up the sworn personnel in the courthouse to be able to better protect the judges and the people at a lower cost than a deputy's salary. I think that all of the things that we do now, I think, is money saving. At some point, you're at a subsistence level, and I think that the Sheriff's Office is rather efficient right now as far as adding other people onto the Sheriff's Office staff. I think that we're doing okay now as far as grant writers and things like that. We have access to them, and we do, in fact, write them. Thank you.
Okay, and again, I want to thank the candidates and thank you, the audience, both for attending and for submitting your questions. And I want to remind you that this will be televised through either AT&T UVerse Channel 99 or Comcast Channel 6, and that'll be throughout the month of March. And to find out exactly when it will air, you can check elmhursttv.com. And with that, I ask the candidates for their closing statements. They each have 1 minute, and we'll begin with Mr. Mendrick.
First, I want to say thank you for this forum. Thank you for your moderation. Thank you all for coming out on a day to find out about your next sheriff candidates. I think it's very important. We have an impact on the community. And, you know, I've been involved for many years doing all the positions that I have in the inception of a lot of the programs that we currently have at the Sheriff's Office. I've been intricately involved in developing many programs, but I think that we can always do better. You know, I've discussed my budget ideas and operational ideas with Dan Cronin and with most of the members of the county board, and they've accepted my solutions. That tells me that I'm on the right track and that I have the buy-in of the county who we're going to be asking for the funding of these programs and these ideas and these budget solutions. Again, you know, we do have great programs at the Sheriff's Office. I love the Sheriff's Office. That's been my life for almost 22 years. But I do believe we could do better. We could give you more. We could provide better safety in your county. And because the bottom line is here, this will never be Jim Mendrick's Sheriff's Office. It will be yours.
Thank you. And Mr. Bibiano.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming out today and taking the time to listen to us. I sit here in front of you as a man with two important jobs. First, I'm a married father of 3, including a son with Down syndrome, and my family brings me unimaginable joy every day. Second, I'm a hard-working police officer, and I respect the educated and committed people in this room and the people of the county that I serve every day. Through our accreditation process, the Sheriff's Office puts out a survey and opinion, and without fail, it comes back as positive, and people reply that they're satisfied or highly satisfied with their Sheriff's Office. The citizens are not looking for a change in their Sheriff's Office. The people of this county have rested safely under Sheriff Zaruba's watch. I have served this county for almost 19 years, and I love what I do in providing service, protection, and stability. I do it for my family here in Elmhurst, and I will do it for your family.
Okay. I want to thank you, and I think the citizens of DuPage have a difficult choice, but 2 good candidates. So thank you again. We're now going to hear from the candidates for the 47th District in the state legislature. And we have candidates Jim Caffrey and Ann Summercamp. And again, I'm Barbara Young, your moderator. And just as before, we'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement. And then I will ask the questions that the league prepared and gave the candidates in advance. And then we'll have an opportunity to take questions from the audience. So we'll begin with Mr. McCaffrey. With your opening, Caffey?
It's Caffrey.
Caffrey, okay. And with your opening statement.
Thank you, Barbara. And good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring today's forum. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jim Caffrey, and I live in Elmhurst with my wife, Mary, and our 2 boys, Jacob and Dylan. I'm running for state representative in District 47 because I believe we deserve better from our legislators. I'm a proud Democrat. But like you, I'm tired of the partisan bickering that's coming out of Springfield. The bickering can only be changed when the roadblocks to compromise, like the governor, are replaced. Over the last 3 years, our fiscal situation has gone from bad to worse, and our state's reputation has gone downhill nationally because of the inability to compromise in Springfield. As a result, it's hard to attract businesses and jobs, students to our universities, and to keep people from leaving the state. Just as the Bears are making changes to put together a winning team, we as voters are being asked to put together a winning team in Springfield. Here in District 47, we have an opportunity for the first time in many years to elect a new team member who will bring new ideas and a fresh approach to the problems of our great state. As your representative, I would like to see Illinois do the following: put an end to gerrymandering, and draw districts that are more balanced of constituents from both parties. And number 2, I'd like to put our financial house in order by coming up with ideas to better spend our tax dollars we have to pay back overdue bills and to find solutions to our pension crisis without cutting back services to the needy or by raising taxes. As a former businessman, Peace Corps volunteer, and a national political organizer, I have the necessary skills to best represent the interests of our district in Springfield. I will be honored for your support in this election. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll hear from candidate Summercamp.
Hi, I'm Ann Summercamp. I'm running for the Illinois General Assembly representative from the 47th District. People like Rauner and Trump are destroying the values that people like you and I are trying to instill in our children. Think about parents today trying to explain to their children exactly what is going on with people like President Trump. Just think about that for 1 second. Governor Rauner lies to his own party to the extent that no self-respecting Republican would even put their name on the ballot for this race in the 47th district. We do have an opponent, but like I said, no self-respecting Republican. Anyway, it's things at stake. It's for the sake of my values and our children's values that I had to stand up and put my name on the ballot. And I want to shout from the rooftops, I will not accept a governor who is a liar, and I will not accept a president who is a racist. It is not okay to treat any human being differently or without dignity and respect. Treating others well at all times and in all circumstances burns through the illusion of darkness rather quickly. A racist cannot mask revulsion too long. Treating others well is about the light and clarity needed to see healthcare as a basic human right. Treating others well is about today. We are responsible for our children's future. Mother Earth is strong, and we need to use every force we can use to sustain our planet for future generations.
Okay, now we'll begin with the league questions, and I'll start with Ms. Summercamp. Where do you stand on ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment?
The ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment folds perfectly into my beliefs that all people should be treated equally. And equality under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on the account of sex. Those 24 years have been in my life since I was 18 years old. That's the first time that the ERA was trying to be passed. So it is in front of the legislature right now for Illinois to pass. We only need 2 more states in order to pass the Equal Rights Amendment for it to become the law of the land. And people think, what do we need the ERA for? Well, there's a few reasons why we need the ERA to pass. Right now, Caucasian and Asian women are still paid about 80 cents on the dollar. African American women are paid about 63 cents on the dollar, and Latino women are earning 56 cents approximately on the dollar, according to Pew Research. Without the ERA, women pay more in health insurance than men or others, and without the ERA, women actually have a harder time acquiring a mortgage. Can you believe that? So the reason the ERA didn't pass in between 72 and 82 was because of a woman named Phyllis Schlafly, who was the head of the Eagle Forum, and she swayed all the Republicans with her scare tactics, and we're not going to sit and listen and wait for that any longer. The 2 states needed are going to be Illinois and probably Virginia.
Thank you. Mr. Caffrey, so I've got it now. That's good. Where do you stand on ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, I support the Equal Rights Amendment, and Illinois should ratify it. One might ask, why now, after 35 years after the deadline, is it still important for the ERA to become part of our Constitution? Haven't we passed enough laws to make it no longer necessary? The short answer is no. Let me review a few reasons why we still need ratification from the equalrightsamendment.org website. 1, without the ERA, the Constitution does not explicitly guarantee that all people are protected equally without regard to sex. 2, While women enjoy more rights today than when the ERA was first introduced in 1923, or when it passed Congress in 1972, hard-won laws against sex discrimination do not rest on any constitutional foundation. They can be inconsistently enforced or even repealed by a simple majority vote. And then 3, we have not moved beyond the traditional assumptions that males hold rights and females, if treated unequally, must prove that they hold them too. And perhaps the most important reason we need to pass the ERA comes from the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Justice Scalia said in September of 2010 that he does not think the Supreme Court prohibits sex discrimination. Think about that. That's an opinion of a member from a modern-day Supreme Court justice. I support the ERA and will proudly vote for its passage if given the opportunity.
Thank you. Second question. Do you believe that only the federal government can legislate on matters of immigration, or do the states have that right when the federal government fails to act? Please explain your position, and we'll start with Mr. Caffrey.
There's no question that immigration is the purview of the federal government. This does not mean, however, that the states are completely powerless to protect the rights of those living within their borders, especially when the issues of health and safety are involved. One example of the proper use of state power is the Illinois Trust Act, which passed last year with Republican and Democratic support. This law protects against warrantless searches with special protections for schools and healthcare facilities. It also helps ensure that victims of crime can step forward without fear of placing their immigration status in jeopardy to allow law enforcement to do the job of fighting crime. It's important to remember that we're a nation of laws. However, the fundamental principle of American jurisprudence has never been the black letter of the law alone, but justice tempered with mercy. Many of you know that I served in the Peace Corps. I was in the West African country of Mali. It was the second poorest country in the world. Just like the folks leaving Europe 100 years prior, many Malians wanted the chance to immigrate here and achieve the American dream. They were college students, farmers, laborers, all wanting something better for themselves and their families. So I worry when people making decisions about our immigration policy do so with a preconceived notion about the people from certain countries or lack a true understanding of our immigration history. Thank you.
Okay, same question, Ms. Summercamp.
All right. Even though there are uniform federal immigration laws, and the Supreme Court has declared more than a century of federal government has the power to make those laws, state and local governments have, throughout the country, have continued to shape the experience of immigrants within their jurisdictions. Notwithstanding the letter of the law, federal immigration law must be interpreted and enforced differently at the state and local level. For example, let's think about DACA, children brought to the United States as children without their own consent. This is the only country they've known, and to export them would be cruel. As Jim was saying, we cannot be cruel to people for any reason. And there's another part of this, sanctuary cities. Illinois has become a sanctuary state. So a judge in California said that the president can't make an executive order just because he doesn't like a law. That's paraphrased. And then the Trust Act, as Jim referred to, was that a lot of immigrants, there's underreporting of crime in an immigrant community because they're afraid to come forward because of being afraid to be deported or just to be taken away by ICE. So it was a very complicated, and I hardly understood it, but then you can apply for this U visa, which seemed incredibly hard to get. So negotiating that system is supposed to make them able to report a crime. Well, after you go through all that, you report the crime, and then the system still messes with you. So, yeah, that's where I was with it, the recommendations.
Okay. Next question. What is your stance on a temporary property tax freeze, which the State House approved last year? We'll begin with Ms. Summercamp.
All right, I knock on doors all through the district, and the main thing that I'm hearing about is, oh my gosh, my property taxes are so high, I can't afford to live in my house. However, this temporary tax freeze, I don't believe is going to do the trick. I mean, I think the problem is much bigger than a 2 or a 4-year tax freeze. And so I'm going to do a little pivot here and say that I think we need to generate more revenue in the state of Illinois. And my favorite tax is the LaSalle Street tax, which is a tax on trades made in the state by the CBOE or the Merc. It's a $1 tax on agricultural products, a $2 tax on things like derivatives and stocks and bonds and currencies, et cetera. And this is not going to force these markets to leave the state of Illinois, because it's expected to generate about $10 billion a year. And they need to be close to where the trading happens. The infrastructure is here, so it's not going to leave. It's not going to be a horrible burden on paying those small amounts per trade, because it's probably, I think, about 0.0002 or 3 per trade. It's nothing. And we could get a lot of money for the state, and it would affect the wealthier in the community instead of taxing poor people, which seems what Illinois tends to do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Caffrey, your view on property tax.
I am opposed to a temporary property tax freeze, and I'm not alone. The Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce is also in opposition to a property tax freeze. According to their recently released paper on the issue, the Chamber said that a state-mandated freeze could result in millions of dollars in cutbacks and service losses, including 13 full-time teachers in year 1 alone, fewer first responders, and a reduction in programs for senior citizens. No one denies that we have a property tax problem here in Illinois. The rates are too high, it's a regressive tax, and it's driving people out of state. We need reform. The best way to reduce rates, however, is through consolidating local taxing bodies and a change to our local pension systems. Illinois has nearly 7,000 local taxing bodies. The next closest state is Texas with 5,200. Each of these districts has leadership and employees that are often redundant to other government entities. We need to aggressively go after consolidation so that we can reduce costs and ultimately lower the property tax burden in the state. One example of consolidation is that there's plans to take the DuPage Election Commission and fold it into the county clerk's office. DuPage Democrats have been advocating for this move for years, and it's estimated that it'll save $300,000. We have many good opportunities to lower property taxes in Illinois. A temporary property tax freeze is not one of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now the fourth question submitted by the League. Do you support changes to the current redistricting process to create rules that make the process more transparent and accountable? And I'll begin with Mr. Caffrey.
I support changes to the current redistricting process and want to stop the gerrymandering that's going on in Illinois. Illinois has districts that look like poorly designed jigsaw puzzle pieces. These districts were designed for purely partisan purposes. What we have done through our current process is to create extremely red and extremely blue districts. What we need are more purple districts where elected officials need to listen to everybody in their district, not just those from their own political party. I support a ballot initiative for a constitutional amendment to change the redistricting process. Several states have a more open, transparent, and fair process that Illinois could look to for guidance. One example is next door in Iowa. Iowa has an independent group that draws the maps while allowing the legislature the ability to simply approve or reject what's been proposed. And if you look at Iowa's map, the districts look much more logical, with boundaries encompassing entire counties instead of splitting up local towns and villages like we do here in Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Summerkin. Same question.
Oh, yeah, I support changing the current redistricting process as well. More transparency and public involvement is necessary. I think that we should look to other states as well, and the example I would use is California. California uses 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, 4 independents. They work in their areas, create a district, they look, and then it's brought to the what they would consider their General Assembly for approval. If it's approved, fine. If it's not, they go back and work and work and work. The problem I'm having is in Illinois, they're talking of having, regular people come in and help with the redistricting, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, are these regular people, quote unquote, are they going to be picked by, the political people? So is it going to stay a politically gerrymandered thing? Because that's not going to help any of us. Like Jim was saying, we need more purple districts because we're here in the 47th. Has our current representative ever listened to anything that any of us have asked of her? Has she ever changed her mind? I mean, what she has done a lot, she would lie straight to my face, but then I'll look on her voting record and it's the exact opposite of what she says to my face. I'm sure that either Jim or me will listen to everybody, take into account what's being said, and hopefully have an open enough mind that if somebody presents us with something, that we'll go along with everybody in the district instead of just one side.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to turn to the questions from the audience. And as a reminder, the candidates have 1 minute to answer these questions. So first of all, what can be done about the state pension crisis? Please include the state Supreme Court ruling in your response. And we'll begin with Ms. Summerkin.
Oh my gosh, the pension crisis. I have been researching on this one. There is a gentleman, I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, Ralph Moliari he's backed by, he's in a think tank. What he says is to consolidate all of the loans and pay them back over 44 years and keep paying what we owe every single year. And the most important part of that is to never let this happen again. The pension is not the place for the Illinois people to just take some money because we want some here and there. The pensions have to be untouchable.
Okay, Mr. Caffrey.
Yes, I believe there's 2 things we can do to reform pensions. One is to reduce our unfunded liability, and 2 is to create a sound retirement system for our future. So let me take the first one. How do we reduce our unfunded liability? What we need to do is re-amortize our debt over 50 years. If you look at the history of our pensions, we put in a 50-year plan that was supposed to end in 2045. The problem was we backloaded all the payments, and the upfront payments, we didn't make them. So now we have this huge liability that's hurting us. But we have to pay the pensions based on what the Supreme Court ruled. So if we re-amortize the debt, we can make a level payment each year, we can spread it out over a longer period of time, and we can mandate that the state pay it every year. Second thing is we need to create a retirement system for the future that's sound and stable for workers and affordable and sustainable for the state. We need to put everything on the table to make that happen, whether it's traditional pensions, 401ks, or involving Social Security in it. I'm not suggesting a solution today, but we need to put everything on the table and have that discussion.
Next question. Illinois leads the nation in the number of levels of government. I think Mr. Caffey alluded to this earlier. Would you review the necessity of having so many governmental bodies, the overlap of services, and the reduction of tax dollars? Mr. Caffey?
Yeah, I did refer to this earlier when I talked about consolidating.
I was listening.
Thank you. Consolidating governments. And it's a real opportunity here in the state. That's the best way we can have an impact on our local property taxes. And actually, the state has done some good work on this past year by giving townships and other organizations the ability to dissolve themselves. So we have the ability to go out there as townships and vote ourselves out of townships if we don't think we're no longer necessary. So I think that's a great avenue for reducing our property tax values and creating a more efficient government. If you look at other states, they don't have 4 layers of government like we do. We have too many layers of government that we need to reduce.
Okay, Ms. Summercamp, your view.
I completely agree. Most states have 3 layers of government, and they work just fine. I looked at our tax bill, and I see, township and county board and village board, and it was almost like down to dog catcher, and every single one of those gets a pension. So we've got the pension problem underneath all of these layers of government, and half the time these people are all getting a pension too. So, yeah, I agree. We could so easily, well, not easily, because it's going to tick a lot of people off. Their jobs are at stake, but some of these people have had these jobs forever and ever and ever. But some of these people might need to be gone anyway. So, I agree.
Ms. Summercamp, I'll start this one with you. Our Illinois universities, like our Midwestern neighbors, are facing declining research dollars and the flight of faculty. These have significant impact on our state and local economies. What would you suggest to improve higher education in the state of Illinois?
Pay the teachers. Because of that budget crisis that was under Rauner, that we went without a budget for so long, university professors were not getting paid. I have a lot of friends who work at the University of Illinois down in Champaign. They left. They wanted their money. They wanted to be paid, and they completely left. So first of all, paying them well. And also another way is people always refer to students and people leaving the state. Well, you know what we could do? We could do what a lot of other states do, and that would be encourage people from other states to come here. We're in a Big Ten area. Big Ten schools, we could recruit from there and have them say, hey, Chicago's a pretty good place to live. You people from Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, come here and live. So that's my take.
Hey, Mr. Caffey.
Well, I think the best way we can attract students to Illinois is to have a healthy economy and a strong and reliable investment in higher education. But what else can we do? We can consolidate our university boards. If you look at Illinois right now, we have 12 public universities, but we have 9 university boards. If you look at other states with excellent public university systems, Wisconsin, California, and New York, they have 1 or 2 university boards. If we consolidate, we can save all that administrative cost and overhead that exists there. In addition to that, we can help the universities around the state become specialized in something. Right now, everybody's competing to be the best at everything. Instead, nobody's becoming the best at anything. So if we can consolidate those boards and specialize the programs at those universities, I think that's a great step towards making Illinois a great location, or continue to be a great location for higher education.
Okay, next question, beginning with Mr. Caffey. Do you believe Illinois should legalize recreational marijuana?
Yes, I support the legalization of marijuana in a tightly regulated fashion. This approach will promote a safer product, reduce crime rates, and allow police to focus on more important issues. We're going to also be able to raise some revenue from this, but I don't want that to be the reason why we're doing it. Let's do it for the right reasons. And if we get some benefit for some additional income that we raise through taxation, that's wonderful. But it's really about promoting a safer product, reducing crime rates, and allowing police to focus on things that are very important.
Okay, Ms. Summercamp, your view.
Yes, I completely believe in the legalization, regulation, and taxation of cannabis because the CBD element in marijuana has been proving very beneficial for people with pain, anxiety. It's already legal in the state for people with cancer. However, doctors are not writing the prescriptions to give to people who are suffering with cancer. Also, as Jim was saying, you get the better product. It's grown. However, there is the problem. Banks cannot take the money from an illegal substance, and it is still illegal in the federal platform, so we'd have to have a state bank. Then a state bank is not insured by the FDIC. There's a lot to be overcome with the legalization process.
Okay. Again, beginning with Ms. Summercamp this time. This one shows a clear viewpoint. How will you stand up to Mike Madigan to get Illinois functioning again?
Well, first of all, every job I have ever had, I've had maybe one or two people that I might have not necessarily liked or gotten along with or cared to work with, but you know what? That's part of my job. And we don't know that Mike Madigan will be the speaker again. There might be other people who are running for the job. So let's just see who's running, and maybe, we'll just have to see who's running and decide who we vote for speaker.
Okay, Mr. Caffey, same question.
Yeah, well, I believe Illinois needs new leadership, both in the legislature and with the governor. But if the question's being asked is, how am I going to work with them? You know, I talk a lot in my campaign about working with coalition and building compromise. So regardless who the leader's going to be, you're going to have to figure out a way to work with them. If Mike Madigan becomes speaker again, I'll figure out a way to work with him to best represent the District of Illinois. Thank you.
Okay, next question. How do you feel about the power of ALEC and think tank and the power they hold over our government? Will you do anything to subdue their power? Mr. Caffrey?
ALCE?
ALEC. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe the person who wrote this
Alec.
question.
Exchange Council, they write the rules and laws and give them to governors to pass in the states
Okay,
to better businesses and not the people's interests.
thank you.
If I recall Alec correctly, based on your description and my trying to remember it, they're very influential in state governments and federal government in terms of influencing legislators to write policy. I think we as the Democratic Party and as legislators, we need to be good about doing our research and having our think tanks work and support us. But at the same time, as a legislature, you just need to be independent. You have to build trust with voters that you're going to listen to everybody, whether it's a think tank or an individual person. So I'm not going to be unduly influenced by any kind of think tank that's out there. But I'm going to listen to folks who are coming to me and talking about issues in this district and things that impact this state.
Ms. Summercamp?
Yeah, I would hope to not, I'm not planning to be in the hands of any lobbyists or such types of things unless it is a lobby with which I agree. Let's say the NRA came and offered me money. I would not take their money because that is not people with whom I would agree in the first place, or it would take one heck of a lot of giving on their side. So with a think tank, a lobby, or anyone, I'll listen, I will be informed, I'll do my research, but it would just be about listening to what the people want and taking it all as far as listening, researching, and finding out what the people in the district want.
Okay. Ms. Summercamp, would you support term limits?
I do not support term limits. I think when people talk about term limits, they are absolutely talking about the speaker who has been in for 40 years. If people don't want me in there, they vote me out. I mean, You know, our district is changing. We had gone from anybody who was a Democrat who put their name on the ballot was probably going to get about 33%. Last election cycle, people were getting between 42, 48%. I think this time, the Democrats are going to take this seat and we'll be around 50-ish, and I think we're doing nothing but going bluer and bluer. So, you know what? If you don't like us, take us out. No term limits.
Okay, Mr. Caffrey.
So I support term limits for legislative leaders. To me, if we're elected as a legislative body, we have the option of determining our own rules and determine who our own leadership can be. So I can support term limits for leadership positions. Frankly, I'm undecided on term limits in general for general office holders. I understand the anxiety and why people are interested in term limits, but I'm also concerned about telling a district who and who cannot run for office in their particular area. I used to be somebody who was against term limits 100% because I felt like we do have term limits and they're called elections. But I will say, because of the anxiety and the concerns that are going on here in the state, that I'm more open to the idea, but at this point, I'm undecided.
Beginning with Mr. Caffrey, how does your background make you better suited to this position?
Well, I think my breadth and depth of experience makes me better suited for this position. I've worked in business for over 20 years. I served my country in the Peace Corps and worked in government. And I worked I was a national political organizer. So I understand how government works, I understand how politics works, and I understand how business works. And I think having that combination makes me best suited. You know, at the end of the day, nobody wants to raise taxes to run our government. We have to find a way to make business more successful and grow our economy so our tax base rises naturally, that we can use those funds to go out there and improve our roads, our schools, and our community. By having a thriving business environment and growing economy, we can do that. And I think my background helps me be in the best position to do that.
Summercamp?
I've run for office before. I was running for Downers Grove Township Clerk in the last municipal election. I was a journalist for 20 years, so I've covered everything from, I spent the night in the White House, the night that Ronald Reagan was shot. I have covered Capitol Hill. I've covered the General Assembly, and I've covered the Chicago City Council. So I can spot political BS from about a mile away. And so for that reason, seeing it from that side, I think being on the inside is going to help me better, know when they're lying to us and how to call them out on lies and how to work with them when I know they're lying. And running for an office, I've also worked with Amanda Howland in taking on Peter Roscom in the last election.
Okay. So we've gone through our questions, and just before we get to the closing statements, I'd like to remind you that this program will air on AT&T UVerse Channel 99 and Comcast Channel 6. One correction, I stated earlier that it will only be airing in March, and I've been told it will air in February and March, which is good news. And then in order to find out the days and times, you can check elmhursttv.com. So now we'll go to our closing statements, and again, each of the candidates has 1 minute. I appreciate their being here and participating in our candidates forum, and I appreciate you, the audience, for attending as well. Ms. Summercamp?
Thank you. So I am running for this office because when we moved here 20 years ago, I saw no Democrats on this ticket. And I thought, that's kind of odd. I can't believe my husband moved me to a place where there was, there's no Democrats. He knows how I feel. And he's from LaGrange. I was born and raised in Missouri. And from Missouri, I moved to Atlanta. And from Atlanta, I moved to Washington, D.C. And so I've, for 20 years, considered running for this state representative position. And finally, with the advent of Donald Trump, and after I laid on the couch crying for one day after that election, I picked myself up, dusted myself off, and said, okay, first I'm going to go for this Downers Grove Township Board race. And I was kind of happy we lost, but you know what? Right now, it's game on. We have got to fight Trump and Rauner at every turn.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Caffrey.
Well, thank you, Barbara, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting today's forum and giving us a chance to speak to the voters of the 47th District. I love living in Illinois and calling Elmhurst home. I've enjoyed going door to door and meeting people at events like this one. It reminds me how important we all are as individuals in running the state because governing starts locally. What we do here in District 47 can contribute to the success of the state in Springfield, which eventually resonates nationally. As a result, I'm more convinced than ever that we can improve our fiscal situation and we can improve our state's reputation. So I say to you, if you want change in leadership, if you want fresh thinking when it comes to resolving our financial problems, if you want election reform and government that works, and I mean works by coalition and compromise, then I ask you to support me, Jim Caffrey, for State Representative in District 47.
I want to thank all of you and thank the candidates. I want to welcome everyone again to the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. I am Barbara Young, your moderator, and right now we'll be hearing from the candidates for DuPage County Board, the District 1 Republican positions, and the District 2 Democratic positions. And the way this will work is that each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement, and then they'll have questions from the league that were submitted to them in advance, and they'll have 2 minutes to answer those. And then if you, the audience, would like to submit questions in writing, we'll take those, and then they'll each get a minute to answer that, and then we'll wrap up with closing statements. So I'm going to begin to my left with Sam Tornatore, who's running for one of the Republican positions in District 1.
Thank you, Barb. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for giving us this opportunity to present our credentials as candidates and to also allow you to get to know us a little bit. I am the incumbent in District 1 on the Republican ticket. I first ran in 2012 for a 4-year term and was reelected in 2016 for a 2-year term. I'm running again in 2018 because I love my job at the county board. There is much to do, and we have a great working environment there to keep DuPage County a great place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm currently the chairman of the Development Committee. Liz Chaplin up here with us is my vice chairman. The Development Committee is in charge and oversees all of the building and zoning in unincorporated DuPage County, from whether or not you want to build a fence on your property to whether or not there's going to be a huge commercial or industrial development. In addition, I'm the vice chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, which oversees the DuPage Care Center as well as our Community Services Division. And I've also been recently appointed the chair of the Legislative Committee in Government Affairs, which works with Springfield to determine legislation which is beneficial to DuPage County. In 2013, I was appointed by Governor Quinn and reappointed in 2015 by Governor Rauner to the Illinois Housing Development Authority. That is an authority that oversees and finances affordable housing within Illinois. In 2015, I also was appointed as one of 2 county board members to the DuPage County Health Department, which deals with environmental, psychological, as well as the clinical health of our residents in DuPage County. I'm an attorney. I live in Roselle, Illinois with my wife, Marcia. I have a daughter, Allison, who was recently married to my son-in-law, Greg. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to have some discussion with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from our second candidate for District 1, one of the Republican seats, Dino Gavanis.
Thank you, Barbara. and thank you for inviting me to this forum. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I hope that in the next hour or so that I can provide you some information about me and some of my views. First of all, I've lived in Illinois all of my life, and in DuPage County for probably half of my life. I was a business owner in District 1 for the last 30 years, having owned insurance agencies. Before we merged with another business in 2011, we had about 20 employees and wrote both commercial and personal insurance, representing many of the premier insurance carriers in the industry. We also provided employee benefits, products, and services to our clients. Our responsibility was to protect the assets of our clients. I grew up in Chicago. I was lucky enough to attend Lane Tech High School. I attended University of Illinois and received a bachelor's degree in engineering. Later, I studied at DePaul University and received an MBA in finance. I hold a CIC designation, which stands for Certified Insurance Counselor. It's a professional designation in the insurance world. I also spent 10 years in the Illinois Air National Guard. My wife Melanie and I reside in Itasca, and between us we have 3 grown and married children living around the country. I welcome your questions and your comments and hope I can offer you a glimpse of who I am. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, our third candidate for District 1 Republican seat, Paul DeMichael.
Thank you for inviting me to the forum today. I am Paul DeMichael. I came to unincorporated DuPage County in 1977, built my house here, sent my children to Conrad Fisher, Churchville, and York schools. They liked it so much, they built their houses here and sending their kids to their schools. I was elected to the school board, and while I was on the school board, I obtained the computer system that did their data processing from my company as a donation. We were changing our profit-sharing system. We had to get rid of the old system, and we gave it to Elmhurst District 205. They used it for 7 years after that. I worked on a township board where I worked on soundproofing at O'Hare. If you live around the airport, you know this is a problem. I was on a fire district where we supplied fire and ambulance protection to the unincorporated areas of Elmhurst and Bensonville. I've done a number of things, and my personal background is I grew up in Chicago, went to Roosevelt University, got my BS there. Then I went to Loyola and got my MBA there, and I'm a certified information systems auditor. I serve now on a tollway committee and working on trying to get Western access into O'Hare and finish the Elgin O'Hare Road. This is pivotal to our area, and it's one of the benefits of the road.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll hear from District 2, the candidates for the Democratic seats, and we'll start with Claire Goldenberg.
Hello. Good evening, and thank you for attending. A special thank you to the League of Women Voters for arranging the forum. My name is Claire Goldenberg, and I am running for a seat on DuPage County Board District 2. I am supercharged from all the power that I felt at the Women's March in Chicago yesterday. The enthusiasm of the wave of change that is sweeping our nation was energized by the hundreds of thousands of people who took to the streets all over the world to make a statement about what they want their country to look like and how they want to be represented. I am confident that we can vote DuPage blue this year. I've been a resident of DuPage since 1991. That's over 25 years of going to the polls, only to be disappointed that there are no Democrats running for office, and it's the same Republicans who are running unopposed again. I feel our government on every level must look like and reflect our community. I will take steps to make sure that that happens, and I'm hoping to represent my neighbors here in DuPage District 2. As a licensed broker and supply chain professional, I've consulted with companies around the world who have traded goods globally. I'm skilled at developing relationships and finding common ground from which we can build the dialogue and move our county forward. I've managed the finances of our household and my business successfully. Being fiscally responsible and managing resources is the key to success in any endeavor. You can rest assured that I will stretch your tax dollars efficiently and effectively. My experience and expertise will guide me in promoting the needs of my neighbors. I will be involved in all aspects of our county government and promote programs that will protect and help our residents advance and improve their lives. We need to make DuPage more attractive for businesses and residents so that we can all benefit. Thank you for your attention, and most especially for your vote on March 20th.
Thank you. And now our second candidate for District 2 Democratic seat, Elizabeth Liz Chaplin.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Liz Chaplin, and I'd like to thank the Elmhurst League of Women Voters for holding the event, and I'd like to thank all the other candidates participating today. I'm the current county board representative for District 2. I've been married to my husband Brian for 28 years, and we have raised our 3 children, ages 22, 20, and 18 in Downers Grove, and we also have 2 dogs. My entry into politics was out of concern and not design, and began in 2001 with the discovery of that our well water was contaminated with hazardous chemicals. Working with the IEPA, the US EPA, the DuPage Water Commission, the Village of Downers Grove, and DuPage County, we were able to secure a safe water supply for our family and 800 other homeowners. In 2012, I was elected to the DuPage County Board, receiving the most votes among the 4 candidates on the ballot in District 2. I have relentlessly challenged excessive salaries and benefits for elected officials and the practice of allowing campaign contributions from vendors doing business with the county. I have called for greater transparency in the county compensation resolution. I requested that the Liquor Commission's agenda and minutes be posted online, and I have stopped the practice of the county clerk moonlighting at the Forest Preserve, saving the taxpayers $10,000 salary and a public pension. I have also worked with many constituents on a variety of issues. Currently in Elmhurst, I'm working with the Virgils on the hoop house issue. My philosophy is that government needs to be frugal and fiscally responsible while providing needed services, which include public safety, quality infrastructure, and human services. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our third and final candidate, Arlene Kendorski.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to share my beliefs and ideas to the voters of DuPage County, especially those in District 2. I would also like to say good afternoon to the other people who are here who are also running for county positions. This will allow us to show the ways that we may be similar and also highlight where we may have differences. After attending county board meetings regularly since January of 2017, I have come to believe that the people of DuPage County would be better served by a board that was more representative of the diverse population of the county. By being a woman and a Democrat, I am taking steps to do that. Other areas of diversity are seen in candidates in the other districts. With more diversity, I would hope to see more active involvement by board members. Currently, involvement is mostly limited to questions and clarifications asked only by Member Chaplin. I am a retired teacher, and I taught in the same school in Downers Grove for over 35 years. I've lived in Downers Grove in the same home longer than that. I am a mother and a grandmother, and so that along with my involvement with the PRC, People's Resource Center in Wheaton, where I volunteer usually 2 days a week, I'm quite busy, and I'm also involved with political groups in local positions. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to express myself and also get to know what the other candidates are thinking as well. I hope you can vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to begin with the questions that were provided to the candidates by the League. And I'm going to start with Paul DeMichael. And the first question is, what is the best way for county government to advance economic development and green technology?
Economic development is being advanced with transportation along the Elgin O'Hare I-390 Expressway. The county is contributing $300 million to the project, and the tollway is spending $3.2 billion. New industrial parks are springing up along the route, and to maximize the value of this project, we need to obtain western access. This is at the heart of the road. I have been and will continue to work with both the tollway and the county to make this happen. I see green technology as being advanced through the revision of the building and zoning codes in the county. New technologies like LED lighting, solar electricity, geothermal heat, high-tech insulation, and smart building wiring can be encouraged through the department's codes. I've worked with building and zoning over the years and will continue working with them to make them abreast of this technology.
Thank you. Liz, Ms. Chaplin?
Thank you. Businesses see technology, transportation as talent as reasons for choosing a location. DuPage County is home to some of the best colleges, universities, and apprenticeship programs. We need to work to keep these young entrepreneurs here in DuPage County. It's important that DuPage continues to maintain its infrastructure, to improve public transportation system, and to continue to have access to quality internet. I really believe DuPage County is doing a good job at attracting businesses, but there is a migration now that we see going to this city. And I do believe that part of that is ebb and flow. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, businesses flocked to the suburbs. And now we're seeing a flock back to the city. So I think DuPage needs to keep doing what it's doing so that when that ebb flows back, DuPage is ready and willing to take those young entrepreneurs back here and start more businesses.
Thank you. Same question for Mr. Gavanis, and that is, what is the best way for county government to advance economic development and green technology?
Green technology, we talk about renewable energy, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, pollution reduction and removal, reusing and recycling. Within these topics, we need to promote business activities that generate economic growth. In DuPage County, we can advance the practice of, for instance, energy efficiency, such as LEED-certified buildings, energy-efficient lighting, motion detection lighting. We can act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by using alternative forms of transportation, perhaps, carpools, fuel-efficient vehicles, mass transportation. Collecting and reusing recycled waste materials is another great way that green technology can advance economic development. Better technologies for pollution reduction and removal. These are all examples of environmental issues that can foster economic development through their solutions. Now, currently, the DuPage Green Government Council, which is an advisory group to the county, has public, private, nonprofit, and utility representation. Their responsibilities include all these topics. I'm a believer that economic activity and prosperity are a direct result of innovation and creativity. Science and technology has to be put in the forefront in our education system, in our county board initiatives, and in our homes and our lives.
Thank you. Same question, we'll go to Ms. Kondorski.
The best way for the county government to advance economic development is for the county to enhance and expand county programs that benefit businesses. Working with schools, the College of DuPage, and the labor union apprentice programs, we can assure a robust, well-educated, and trained group of potential employees. Public and transportation enhancement and expansion is also needed. I have attended several public transportation committee meetings. I know that PACE, Metro, etc. do work actively with the county, but I feel there needs to be a push to give the residents of DuPage more information on what is available. I believe with more information, there will be growth in leadership, which can spiral into improvements. The county can advance green technology by embedding more green technology criteria whenever the county looks to improve and expand programs and services. Although some information, such as agendas, for example, can be found online, the county does not promote all the information available online, so printed material is still printed for all the meetings. Many people still do not think of going to the county website to get information. The county should model green technology and reward businesses that employ it in their operations. The county should use its influence in promoting more green technology and the business use of green energy. Besides commercial businesses, public transportation, schools, local governments, and community organizations could work with the county in innovations in green energy use. Reaching out to all of those groups should be part of the county's vision.
Thank you. Mr. Tornatore, your turn.
Thank you. I think the best way for county government to advance economic development through green technology is all of the things that have been said this afternoon, and to continue what we're doing currently at the county. As been indicated before, the county campus buildings are LEED certified. That has resulted in a $450,000 savings in the last 2 years and $750,000 savings over the last 4 years. We attract environmentally friendly businesses. One of the ways we do that is for our Building and Zoning Department to reward environmentally friendly businesses with reductions in permit fees, as well as moving up in the queue to get their permits taken care of more quickly if they show themselves to be environmentally friendly. We have a latex paint and electronic recycling process throughout the county, which has resulted in 1 million pounds of electronic recycling being taken care of within the last year. We have 13 shredding activities throughout the course of the county annually. The something called the Cool DuPage Initiative works with local businesses to reduce greenhouse gases. When I got on the board with Liz a few years back, we had a goal of 20% reduction in greenhouse gases. We're at 11%, and we're moving toward that as we go ahead. And the other thing that I'm quite proud of, because it's something that we developed at our committee at development, is something called the Neighborhood Revitalization Program, where homes in disrepair and abandoned properties are being either taken care of and cleaned up or demolished, which will ultimately result in a benefit to the environment. Our unemployment rate as a result of this is 3.9% in DuPage County, which is a full percent less than it is in Cook County. I think that's a result of our attractiveness to environmentally friendly businesses, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And finally, Ms. Goldenberg.
In order to advance economic development in our county, we need to find ways to implement education, job, and language programs that will result in better opportunities for our residents to find higher-paying jobs. Free junior college and targeted internship programs starting in high school will encourage companies to locate here due to our skilled and educated workforce, resulting in an economic boon for all of us. Green technology is an initiative I am very interested in. I am an avid recycler, composter, and no pesticide gardener. I want to develop environmental and sustainability programs in schools and to encourage student engagement. I will highlight the benefits of programs like FreeCycle and the long-term benefits of building green and promoting green energy for all county facilities. We can work to develop codes for more efficient building in our county and attract green technology businesses through county incentives.
Thank you. Now, this is the second question from the League. Do you see a need to consolidate functions, streamline processes, reduce headcount, and lower expenses in county government? And if so, what do you propose? And I'd like to start with Ms. Kondorski.
Consolidation and streaming are ideas that many are seeing as the way to make budgets stretch. I believe that when consolidation is considered, the legal and logistical details need to take place first. The consolidation of Lisle and Naperville Township's Highway Commission was voted on in April of 2017 and is still not in place because of implementation difficulties. Streamlining is also being looked at more often, but it's not a panacea. Streamlining changes that are troublesome or inconvenient for residents may not be well received by voters and may not even be cost-effective in the long run.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Gavanis.
There's definitely a need to continually search for ways to consolidate and/or streamline operations. It should be noted, however, that the DuPage Act initiative has made these reforms since 2011, generating about $100 million in savings. Things like restructuring employee benefits, shared services agreements with Kane County, consolidation of some local government bodies. In addition, the board has voted to put an advisory referendum on the March ballot to consolidate the election commission with the clerk's office, county clerk's office. Other consolidations have also been planned. We certainly shouldn't stop there, however. Infrastructure advances could help reduce operating costs, for instance. Areas such as, LED lighting, motion detection lighting for public buildings and roadways, which have begun, actually, would be another area that would be beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Goldenberg?
I will promote the Chairman's ACT initiative because it is exactly how government should be run. ACT stands for Action, Consolidation, and Transparency. This is a good start to reducing redundancies and promoting innovation into our government. However, in practice, the board falls short of these goals. The citizens have lost their trust in the government to implement consolidation fairly. The board must reflect the voters, not the corporate money that buys elections. I plan to work diligently to ensure the county does not operate in the shadows. The will of the people, not corporations, should be our mandate. Therefore, we need to encourage our residents to be more involved. Knowledge and participation are the keys. Change is often challenging, but we can create an environment that will be open to new ideas if our messaging is compelling.
Thank you. Mr. Tornatore?
Thank you. I do support consolidation, and I absolutely support the Chairman's ACT initiative, which also does not stand for action, it stands for accountability, consolidation, and transparency. But we're pretty active at the county as well. We've done this through a balanced budget. Our reduction and consolidation has reduced our headcount by 100 over the last 5 years. We've reduced the county budget by $38 million since 2011. We've cut the county sales tax by 0.25%, which results in a $36 million annual savings to county residents. We've dissolved 4 units of local government, which were found to be unnecessary. We cross-train our employees. We transformed an underused judicial juvenile detention facility into a DUCOM center, which takes care of PSAPs, which are the places, the public safety answering points, 9/11 centers, from 22 to 3, which will result in a $4.5 million annual savings. We've reduced to get legislation to consolidate the Election Commission. The ACT initiative works. It's under our Chairman's leadership. It has continued to work, and I promise to continue that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chaplin?
Thank you. Yes, the ACT initiative that DuPage County has, in my view, is a little bit more about public relations and political marketing than actually saving tax dollars. While consolidation of paper fire districts is worthwhile, it hasn't really actually saved any money despite all the hype and hoopla that surrounds such an effort. In the last several years, there hasn't been any real government consolidations that have actually saved a meaningful amount of money to taxpayers. I do not support the county interfering in municipal, township, fire district, or any other county's consolidation or lack of consolidation efforts. With regards to savings, there are some very easy steps the board could take that would not impact the citizens of DuPage County. DuPage County is home to some of the highest paid elected officials in the state. Reduce the salaries for all the elected officials in DuPage, eliminate pensions and benefits and health care for county board members, and eliminate the stipends for elected officials. The DuPage County Board budget calls for $282,000 for lobbyists, and the state's attorney office calls for another $48,000 for lobbyists. The Kane County Board acts as their own lobbyist and spends nothing. DuPage County Board and the state's attorney should mirror Kane County and act as their own lobbyist. The DuPage County Election Commission budget also calls for $135,000 for legal counsel. The Election Commission could use the DuPage County State's Attorney as legal counsel, eliminating the need to spend money on outside legal counsel. The consolidation of the Election Commission, the Clerk's Office, which I support and have supported for a long time, which was actually initiated by Gene Kazmarek many, many years ago, has been talking about this, would approximately save the county board $300,000 a year. Thank you.
Okay. And finally, Mr. DeMichael.
The consolidation of the Board of Elections with the county clerk's office is imminent. I predict it will happen this year. The county has many boards and committees where members are appointed by the county board chairman. These include fire districts, sanitary districts, and mosquito districts. These are all taxing bodies. These all should be reviewed for potential consolidation. However, the county has had a flat property tax assessment for 10 years. It has done more with less. In 1987, the county tax rate was 0.7876. It is now 1.351. In the same period, our school district went from 4.3066 to 4.647. The county is 3% of your tax bill, and the school district is 80%. Reduction of property taxes cannot solely be the responsibility of the county board.
Thank you. Okay, the third question from the league. If elected, what 3 specific initiatives would you like to accomplish during the upcoming term in office? And we'll start with Mr. Tornatore.
Thank you. It's very difficult to narrow down 3 things that we'd like to accomplish, or at least try to accomplish during the next 4 years. So I'm going to lump a couple of them together. O'Hare noise is obviously a very important initiative for us, and that goes hand in hand with Western access. We are working with the O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission on a regular basis in the city of Chicago to try to get the fly-quiet rotation in place so that cities like Elmhurst, as well as where I live, and other areas within the O'Hare runway situation can get reduced so that people can sleep at night. We're also working to resolve stormwater issues. As you know, if you live in Elmhurst, stormwater and flooding has been a problem. The Elmhurst Quarry has been a significant help in reducing that. We're currently working with the county CMAP, which is the Chicagoland Metropolitan Agency for Planning, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, to deal with the Salt Creek watershed to try to reduce flooding. And the Neighborhood Revitalization Program, which I indicated earlier, has brought further green opportunities for flooding to water to go into those areas. And lastly, the heroin opioid epidemic is something that's very important to us at the county. We have joined with 4 other counties to sue pharmaceutical companies, such as the tobacco industry did many years ago, to try to stop the opioid epidemic, which is being promulgated on our residents from young people to older people, from the pharmaceutical companies which are promoting these pills and drugs as ways and means to correct the pain that they're undergoing, which ultimately is resulting in them becoming heroin addicts. Those are a number of initiatives, and certainly there are more as well.
Thank you. Ms. Goldenberg?
Okay. First of all, we need broader transparency in government, and I am excited to promote a participatory program. I will work to create a communication system where the residents of DuPage can utilize technology and surveys to inform us about what is important to them and their well-being. When matters come up for discussion, votes, and public comment, we can push this information to those residents who can weigh in and make their voices heard before the board votes something into the record. Secondly, I am concerned about civil rights and social justice. I will work with local leaders and look to other communities and learn what programs work best and implement and promote comparable outreach programs here in DuPage. And third, I will champion the needs of the poor and disabled. Over the last decade, DuPage has grown and diversified. Sadly, we have a growing population of families who do not have enough food to eat, and children in our county go hungry. I would like to work with organizations that help with before and after school programs that include meals for these children and expand them and implement them in places where they are needed and will have an immediate impact.
Okay. Now we'll turn to Mr. DeMichael for your 3 initiatives.
My 3 initiatives are a western access to O'Hare Field, a substance abuse prevention programs, and last mile transportation along the I-390. I have worked on a tollway commission for the I-390 Elgin-O'Hare Expressway. This project is closely coupled with gaining western access to the airport. This is important to the project. Without it, I-390 will be just another route to the tri-state. I will work with the towns of Elmhurst, Bensonville, Wooddale, Addison, Bloomingdale, and Roselle to minimize the negative impacts and on the quality of life which O'Hare expansion has already caused. Substance abuse has become an epidemic in DuPage County. I've worked with the state's attorney, the regional office of education, the coroner, and local law enforcement on substance abuse prevention programs. We have come up with alternative programs to help stem the tide, but much needs to be done. Prevention is much less expensive than prosecution. And finally, my 3rd initiative would be working with the tollway to provide last-mile bus transportation along the I-390 route. This will allow businesses to develop as they get employees who do not have vehicles to get to their place of work.
Okay. Turning to Ms. Chaplin, your 3 initiatives.
Yes, thank you. The citizens of District 2 have been especially hit hard by the severe weather, flooding. So I will continue to work on flood mitigation. Besides all the initiatives that Sam talked about, DuPage County is also in the process of preparing a natural hazards mitigation plan, and that is coming to fruition. Right now, we're seeking community input, so I'd like to see that plan through and put in place. Also, last spring, out in our area, the Lisle Woodridge and Darien Woodridge Fire District entered into a functional consolidation. This consolidation included closing 1 fire station in the Lisle Woodridge Fire District. I'm very concerned about closing fire stations in DuPage County. So I would like to facilitate the election of local boards, such as the Lisle Woodridge Fire District, rather than appointed boards, these appointed boards by the county chairman. And lastly, I'd like to continue and to encourage cooperation and collaboration among local governments within District 2, especially as it relates to the heroin epidemic and mental health issues, including suicide. Because here in Elmhurst, as well in Downers Grove and Naperville, we have had many suicides in our high schools. And currently, I am working in Lisle Township with a group, the Lisle Township Supervisor, school district officials, and the police department in addressing these issues, mental health and suicide. So those are 3 really important issues in District 2. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Gavanis?
If elected, there are a few areas I'd like to jump into. First is, I would love to see the county get involved in the systematic expansion of youth engagement in our political process and governmental activities. You know, we have excellent school districts in DuPage County, but all of us, we have a responsibility to our children, our grandchildren, to give them the tools to make intelligent decisions regarding our government. More needs to be done to educate our youth on the areas of civics, you know, government procedures, and political science. That's number 1. Number 2, I agree with all that's been said about that was opioid misuse and addiction. It was number 2 on my list, and I echo everything that's been talked about. I think it's a situation that we're running into some serious problems with, but I'll leave that. Lastly, I've been an entrepreneur almost all of my life. I would embrace the opportunity to work with the county and entities like the College of DuPage, as well as any other group, to help foster entrepreneurship in our county. You know, it's happening right now at Argonne National Labs with the chain reaction innovations. But we need to do more of that. We need to have a county government that promotes and supports new businesses, including technology-driven businesses, especially ones that create high-paying jobs.
Okay. And finally, Ms. Kondorski?
First, I would like to see the county board do away with highly paid lobbyists. Our county board members should and do have contacts with local, state, and federal officials. Neighboring counties do not have paid lobbyists. County board members do the lobbying for them. This initiative piggybacks perfectly with Ms. Chaplin's previous answer to the last question. Second, I would like to see at least 1 or 2 of the monthly meetings be held in the evening. This initiative and the next one come from my regular county board experience. When I go to the regular meetings, these are things that I find troubling. Having all-day meetings limits the people who can run for office to people who can work, who can take off during the day without financial implications. It also limits in-person attendance by residents. And I know that there is a taping of the county board meeting, but that does not allow people to see the interactions that occur between the board members during that in a live meeting. Third, I would like to change comments to comments and questions on the agenda. I would also like to add a second spot for it on the agenda right before adjournment. On my first county board meeting, I was told that I couldn't ask a question when I spoke during the comment time, and when I kind of questioned that, I was told that that's just the way we do it. I would also like to have a second spot on the agenda for comments at the end, right before adjournment. Currently, people have to wait till the next county board meeting to ask a question that occurred during that meeting.
Okay.
Oh, just can I, no, sorry.
I think we're out of time.
Okay, thank you.
But you'll be able to fit it in somewhere else. Okay, now we're at the 4th question. Where do you stand on elected county board officials participating in the Illinois Municipal Retirement System? And we'll start with Mr. Tornatore.
Well, as the only person up here this afternoon on this dais who participates in the Illinois Municipal Retirement System, I assume that my views are going to be different than my colleagues. I will tell you that without getting into the specifics of IMRF, it is not the same pension system that caused the problems in Springfield. It is fully funded. It has very low impact on taxpayers. And when I joined it a number of years ago, it was the best decision for myself and my family, and it was offered, and currently approximately half of the county board members do participate. Let me just say this. In 2017, when the state legislature had what I would consider a knee-jerk reaction to the state pension problem, it suggested and it mandated that new county board members not participate. It also allowed current county board members to opt out. I seriously considered opting out of the system. However, in order to do that, I would have had to sign an affidavit stating that I did not work the 1,000 hours a year that was the threshold for IMRF participation. I refused to sign that. It would have been untrue, it would have been misleading, and it would have been a lie. Because I didn't sign it, I couldn't opt out. And I've essentially remained in there. And I did not sign that, and I could have easily signed that for political expediency and for the optics, but I chose not to do it. The IMRF is a pension system. It is commensurate with the time that we spend and the amount of money that we make. And quite frankly, anybody who thinks that the county board is not a full-time job doesn't know what a county board member does.
Okay, we'll go to Ms. Chaplin.
Thank you. So, county board members, I feel, should not receive taxpayer-funded pension or health insurance. I've never accepted a taxpayer-funded pension or health insurance. And my reasoning is the people in my district, in District 2, that work part-time, 1,000 hours a year, they don't receive a pension or health care. So that was my basic reasoning for not accepting that pension and why I don't take the health care. Governor Rauner, as Mr. Tornatore mentioned, did sign a Public Act 099-0999, which provides that newly elected county board members will be ineligible for the IMRF pension and requires incumbent county board members to keep timesheets providing that they work at least 1,000 hours per year. So I wasn't aware, Sam, that you had to sign that you didn't work those 1,000 hours a year, that you had to sign that. So I would thought that would be this would be an ideal way for county board members to opt out, but now I see that that's not the case. So, but those are my thoughts on the pension for the IMRF.
Thank you. Mr. DeMichael?
The Illinois Municipal Retirement System, commonly called IMRF, is probably the best pension system in Illinois. It is fully funded. It was designed for municipal employees who accepted a lower salary in return for a good retirement pension. As I understand it now, only incumbent county board members are eligible for this pension, and newly elected county board members are not. If elected, I would consider myself ineligible for the pension. I would not take it.
Okay. Ms. Goldenberg?
As part-time elected officials, county board members have no place participating in a municipal retirement program. This is an unnecessary and expensive benefit that must be eliminated to help control our budget. IMRF might be fully funded, but that doesn't make it right. It is not an equitable system for our government officials to have these benefits paid for by a population that often has to decide to purchase medicine over food for their family. Therefore, I will not be participating or taking any of these benefits if I get elected. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gavanis?
Since I am not eligible to participate in the retirement plan, I feel that the county and the state has done their job. However, I would throw in there that I do support pension reform in the state of Illinois. I think it's long overdue and something has to be done. Unfortunately, that's not a county job.
Okay. And finally, Ms. Kondorsky.
As other people have mentioned, as newly elected member, because of the action that was signed into place by Governor Rauner, I would not be eligible for that. I would like to see a salary decrease back to the amount before the last raise. If action was taken to decrease the county board salary, that would also lower the amount of the pensions that would be paid into for the people who are in a position where they are still receiving that. I would also expect that reliable and verifiable records be kept and submitted to show proof of the required time for those people that are still eligible for IMRF. And I would count that time to be not photo ops, but actually 100 hours working for the benefit of the people in DuPage County.
Okay, so that's it with the league questions. Now we're going to get to the questions from the audience, and I would encourage you to turn in more questions. I only have a few up here, and we still have about a half an hour, but we'll jump right in. So starting with Ms. Goldenberg, here's the first question. How can the county work towards the elimination of township government, including absorption of township services?
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. How can the county work towards the elimination of township government, including absorption of township services?
Well, I would not promote the elimination of township governments. I don't think that that's going to benefit our townships in any way. We need to have a very local representation as well as county representation.
Okay. And Mr. DeMichael?
This is kind of like a question, like, when did you stop beating your wife? It assumes a position. If you eliminate township government, you have to eliminate or replace those workers that are handling like human services and roads and tax assessment with other people. And if you look at township salaries, traditionally those salaries are lower than that at the centralized county. So I don't know that I would be a big advocate for elimination of townships at this time.
Okay, Ms. Kondorsky, your view?
I had to take a minute to stop and think about this. It's an interesting question. I've been since I guess about April, I've been attending township meetings in Lisle on a regular basis, and I can see some of the things that the townships do that are the province of the township. I believe that the townships are responsible for the assessing of property or the assessing of buildings and residents for tax purposes. And in order to make these changes, we'd have to make a lot of changes in laws and the Constitution. We just can't say it. We have to find out how to pick up those services that the township does.
Mr. Gavanis?
I don't support the elimination of township governments. I see what they do, and replacing them with, what would you replace them with? And would you try to consolidate those into the county? You wouldn't have any significant savings, and it could actually cost you more money, so I don't support it.
Ms. Chaplin?
Yes, thank you. Out in Lisle Township and Naperville Townships, there was a referendum on the last ballot, last election, to merge the two townships together as one. I attended the last Lisle Township meeting, and there was discussion among the Lisle Township board members regarding the consolidation of the two townships. Right now, there's really no direction, there's no guidance, they're in limbo. So I voted no on the referendum, just to be clear on that. I think anytime we do consolidation, we need to it needs to be thought out, well thought out. We can't rush it, again, for political expediency to get a headline. It needs to be thought out, because now Lisle Township and Naperville Township are both kind of in limbo, not knowing what their next steps are in this consolidation process.
Finally, Mr. Tornatore?
I do not support the elimination of township government. It is the most local of governments. It is the oldest of governments in the state of Illinois. As has been said before, if we were to eliminate township government, someone or something would have to replace it. I doubt very seriously it would be done any more economically than it currently is. So I certainly am opposed to any abolition of township government.
Okay. Next question from the audience, and I'm going to start with Ms. Kondorsky. It's kind of long, but I'll read it. O'Hare is an economic generator for the area, yet DuPage communities are negatively impacted by noise, air pollution, and quality of life issues. The O'Hare Modernization Plan will increase air traffic and those negative impacts. How will you advocate for residents of DuPage, and would you support sharing O'Hare's air traffic with other regional airports?
Right now, I don't know how much I can answer that question, to be very honest. I don't know that much about how regional and airports and O'Hare airports operate. It seems to me on face value that if they could cooperate and share the traffic, that would be a good idea. But I don't know if that's possible. I'd have to research and I'd have to figure out whether that was possible. I think that no matter what the issue is, the people on the county board need to look out for the people in DuPage County, whether it's O'Hare or anything else.
Mr. Gavanis?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that O'Hare is an economic engine, and I think the economic engine comes not only for Cook County, but obviously DuPage benefits a great deal. I understand the noise. I live in Itasca, so I can understand what the noise factors are. And technology, I think, will, I hope, at some point reduce that amount of noise and pollution. But I don't support the idea of sharing the runways or sharing the load with other airports, such as Rockford or Midway or something like that.
Okay. Ms. Goldenberg?
Yes, I would not support consolidating air traffic control. O'Hare is a vibrant and needed airport for our community. It makes us very attractive to businesses globally and nationally. And I believe that trying to eliminate services by cutting corners on your air traffic control would just wreak havoc, and I would not support it.
Okay. Mr. DeMichael?
I live near O'Hare, and I watched them take 600 homes in Bensonville and knock them down, and knock down the only hardware store in town where you can't buy a nail in town anymore. It has had a negative impact directly on our community. However, it makes a lot of money for the city of Chicago. I would like to see us getting into a bigger share of that. I would think that we would, as we put the Elgin O'Hare in, that we should capitalize on the traffic coming in from the western side of the airport. Other than that, I would not consider permitting any more expansion of O'Hare.
Chaplain?
Yes, thank you. I pretty much agree with everyone so far on the panel. I don't think diverting air traffic to other airports in the area would be good for the economic status of DuPage County. And as far as the impact on the residents, you know, there might be a possibility of getting grants and funding to help certain neighborhoods that are highly impacted by the noise with soundproof windows or soundproofing their homes in some way that might be able to help them, you know, live in this area where our air traffic is heavily increasing. But I agree basically with everyone else on the panel.
Okay. Mr. Tornatore?
O'Hare Airport's in Chicago. The Federal Aviation Administration administers O'Hare Airport. It's a federal issue. We have done what we can at the county in conjunction with the City of Chicago and through the O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission to try to reduce that noise. It's not been the best solution, but we're hoping to move towards it. As far as money for people for soundproofing and the like, there is money available. A good friend of mine who lives in the northwest side of Chicago recently had all new windows put in his house as a result of it, which they deserved. As far as regional airports, I don't know that we can divert much. I know that some air traffic goes to the DuPage County Airport, which is a jewel. If you've never been there, you should go there. It's a wonderful place to go. But certainly I think O'Hare is what it is. We're close to it. The benefit we get from O'Hare, we just have to deal with sometimes with the bad with the good, unfortunately. But we're moving to try to correct it.
Okay. And here's the final question for each of you, and that is, what led you to want to run for county government? And I'll start with Ms. Goldenberg.
Well, I think I may have addressed that before. I got very involved in my local government after the election in 2016 as a way to try and counteract my despair of the person that we elected for our president. And I knew that I needed to do something other than just complain about it. So I got involved, started going to the township meetings and started going to the county board meetings. And I am energized and excited to represent my neighbors and try and make a positive impact for them and keep everything open and honest with our DuPage County.
Okay, and Mr. Tornatore, I guess we're talking about 6 years ago, right?
Yes, as far as county government, prior to that, I was a Roselle Village trustee where I live, as well as a township trustee. I served on the Roselle Village Board, and I've been involved in government and public service since I graduated from school. I think it's what you need to do. My dad and mom always told me to give back. I think the best way for me to give back is to be involved, whether it's coaching a soccer team at the local park district or getting involved in politics. Fortunately, I've had the ability and the opportunity to get involved in government, to represent people who I know, my neighbors, my family, my friends, and getting involved in it on the county level has given me an entirely different perspective than I had on the village level and the township level. And I can tell you that I believe that all of our current county board members share that view as well.
Ms. Chaplin?
Yes, thank you. Well, as I spoke in my opening statement, my entry into politics was out of concern and not design with the contamination of our well water. While I was advocating for safe water for myself and my neighbors, DuPage County Board Chairman Bob Schillestrom appointed me to the DuPage Water Commission in 2004, and then he appointed me in 2002 and reappointed me in 2004, where I served 8 years on the election commission. So I believe I did a really good job on the Water Commission. I was singled out in the forensic audit that was done by calling out practices, financial practices that weren't being properly administrated. So with that, I thought my next step would be to run for the DuPage County Board.
Okay, Mr. DeMichael?
I've served on a school board, a town board, a library, not a library board, a fire board, and a Lake District board. I won't say the natural progression is to the county board, but I really wanted to go there for some time. I feel all the other boards I've been on have been like micromanagers of projects around town, and I would like to get to a macro manager. That's why I'm seeking this position, and I intend to make it a full-time job.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Kondorski?
I've been active in politics all of my life. It started when my father read the editorials of the Philadelphia newspaper out loud at dinner. As a teacher, I was involved in the IEA, the NEA, and I was president of my local's Teachers Association. I started working for George McGovern. That was the first campaign I worked on when I lived in Colorado. And my county was the only county in Colorado that went for Mr. McGovern. I became a precinct committee person in 2016 when Member Chaplin asked me to consider doing that. I've gotten involved totally in it. Being involved in government and politics is an all-consuming thing, I found, but it's something that gives me great satisfaction.
Thank you. And I think I've asked all of you this question, or Mr. Gavanis, I think. Okay, your turn.
I've been involved in a number of nonprofit boards, police pension board currently, and I believe that giving back is part of what you do. DuPage County and District 1 has been very good to me over the years. my business flourished, and we did very well. And it's with my background, I think I could give something back and do a good job.
Thank you. So before we turn to closing statements, I'd like to thank all the candidates for participating. I'd like to thank the audience for attending and also submitting questions, and then remind everyone that this will air in February and March over AT&T UVerse Channel 99 and Comcast Channel 6. And if you want to know when and what dates it's going to air, you can check elmhursttv.com. It's been my pleasure to moderate, and now I'll turn it back to the candidates for their 1-minute closing statement, and we'll start with Ms. Chaplin.
Thank you. So DuPage County will be facing some difficult budget decisions going forward. It's important that we have leaders that are not afraid to ask tough questions and challenge the status quo. I believe that I have a proven track record of doing just that. Local leaders now have to take the lead where our federal government is failing, making sure that the 13,269 children in DuPage that are covered by the Children's Health Insurance Plan keep their coverage, opposing the Trump administration's rollback of the Obama administration's use of toxic chemicals that keeps our water safe. We're facing an opioid and mental health crisis. We need elected officials that have deep roots in the community and have had successes at finding solutions to the many issues facing the citizens of DuPage County, and I am that candidate. It has been a pleasure to participate in today's forum. I'd again like to thank the League of Women Voters and all of the candidates. My name is Liz Chaplin, and I respectfully ask for your vote on March 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeMichael, your closing statement.
I want to finish the Elgin O'Hare Expressway and bring Western access into the airport along with it. I want to stop the spread of drug abuse in DuPage County and save our children's lives. I want to bring last mile transportation to the business parks in DuPage and help employees get to work and businesses grow. I've done a lot in the past, and I've been highly visible in this community. I have a resume downstairs on the counter. If you could pick one up on the way home, you can see that. I want to finish things that I started years ago, and that's why I'm seeking this county board position.
Thank you. Ms. Kondorski?
I want to start this by including the statement that I didn't get a chance to do before when I ran out of time, and that is that my initiatives that I talked to you about, the last two, will save money and they will increase citizen input. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and our moderator, Barbara Young, for making this forum possible. I want to thank the other candidates for their cooperation and thoughtful answers. I want to thank all of you for coming, and I want to implore all of you to vote in the primary. Your vote and every vote is important. Remember, if you don't vote, you can't complain about what happens. I hope you will vote for me.
Thank you. Mr. Gavanis?
The challenge of being a board member is one I take seriously. Having known what it means to have employees that count on you for their well-being, having to meet a payroll every couple of weeks, and be responsible for protecting your clients' assets, it's a responsibility I don't take lightly. I believe that my educational and professional background gives me tools that will help me do a good job in this position and effectively represent District 1. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your support.
Thank you. And Ms. Goldenberg?
I'm running for as a first-time candidate because I believe in open and honest and transparent government. I feel it is important to stand up and fight for people whose voices are not being heard, and I want to make certain that social services are available for DuPage residents in need. We need to protect the safety nets in place that help women, seniors, and families. I will work towards a fair and balanced board that represents and protects the rights of all the people in DuPage. And the fair and balanced part is the key. When I first went to a county board meeting, I was quite taken aback by the homogeneous look of it. I've lived in DuPage for 25 years. DuPage is not homogeneous, and I want to work to make sure that it reflects our community.
Thank you. And now we'll end where we began with Mr. Tornatore.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and all of you who are here at 5:25 on a Sunday afternoon listening to us. As someone who's about to see my name on a ballot for a 5th election, I can tell you that the most I can expect out of anybody who votes is hopefully an educated voter, somebody who's looked at the candidates, looked at the issues, and made a decision based on their qualifications. If, based on that, you decide to vote for me or another candidate, that's great. If you don't, I can respect that. What I can tell you is that I love my job, I enjoy public service, and that with the will of the voters, I hope to continue that for another 4 years. And I do again, thank you very much for your participation.
Okay, and with that, I thank you and I thank the candidates, and have a good evening.
Starting this fall, the City of Elmhurst will begin a citywide water meter changeout project requiring all residential and commercial water meters to be replaced. This project is needed because the majority of the city's meters are over 25 years old and have exceeded their life expectancy. The city has experienced many years of 18 to 20% of unaccounted for water. The city has hired Siemens as contractors to replace all water meters with highly accurate, non-moving part mechanical water meters that will aid in detecting leaks. The new water meters have the ability to provide on-demand reads as well as leak and tampering alerts and early identification of leaks before they surface. A customer portal will also be available for residents to electronically monitor for leaks and manage their water consumption online. Elmhurst water customers can expect to receive an introductory letter with project information. Project updates will regularly be posted on the city's website and social media pages. Residents are also encouraged to attend informational open house events that will be scheduled at City Hall. The water meter changeout project is expected to occur through spring of 2018 and is mandatory for all residents and businesses. The project will be completed in sections throughout the city. When Siemens is approaching a neighborhood, residents in the area will be sent a series of postcards requesting to schedule an appointment. Residents are asked to be responsive and schedule an appointment once this notification is received. The new water meter will be installed at no additional cost. Residents will be expected to have an adult over the age of 18 years old home at the time of appointment, which should take no more than 30 minutes to complete. Residents should attempt to locate their water meter in advance and ensure the meter is accessible for Siemens at the time of the appointment. On the date of the water meter changeout, the resident should take precautions and look for the logo on the installer's uniform and vehicle and make sure the installer's ID is visible before allowing the installer to enter the home. All of Siemens installers will be identified with an ID badge and will be driving marked vehicles. They will also be wearing project shirts with the project logo. Once the installer enters the home, residents will be asked to guide the installer to the location of the water meter. The installer will take the following steps to complete the water meter changeout. First, the installer will turn the water off at the main valve. Then the installer will exchange the old meter with the new meter. The installer will then turn the water back on, confirm proper flow direction, and inspect the installation to make sure no leaks are visible. The installer will connect the communication wire to the new meter and test to make sure a meter reading can be obtained. Finally, the installer will ensure that the work area is clean around the new water meter before leaving. During the installation process, the installer will take pictures of the old and new water meter. Once the water meter installation is complete, the installer will give the resident information on how to read the new meter and gain access to an online program called WaterSmart. WaterSmart is an online portal where residents can view account information, monitor daily water consumption, detect leaks, and set up notification alerts. The installer will also give the resident information on how to complete a customer service survey. Once the water meter is replaced, residents will receive a bill that will look the same as previous bills, but will include any remaining water use on the old meter, along with any cumulative use on the new meter. All subsequent bills will only include use from the new meter. A noticeable difference in the new bill will include uses registered in gallons versus cubic meters. Any billing questions should be directed to the city's utility billing department by calling 630-530-3111. The City of Elmhurst would like to thank all water customers for their cooperation during this important city project. Please visit www.elmhurst.org/water-meter-changeout for more information and to find out what area Siemens is currently working in. For questions on the installation process, please contact Siemens at 866-260-3176.